Well, Miss Brooks manages to keep busy teaching English at Madison High School. But in spite of her preoccupation with her own subject, she's managed to find quite a bit of time lately to pursue the study of biology.
Well, one thing is certain. I've spent more time pursuing the study of biology than the biology teacher has spent pursuing me. Anyway, I was pretty surprised last week when my landlady, Mrs. Davis, told me that Mr. Boynton had borrowed my copy of Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac from our library. We were discussing it last Thursday morning while Mrs. Davis was getting breakfast ready.
I can't understand it, Tommy. Cyrano is a very romantic play. Does Mr. Boynton read that kind of literature?
I doubt it very much. Although he surprised me once before this when I saw a book on his desk called Come Fly With Me.
That sounds like a very racy...
That read, The Life and Times of an African Tsetse Fly.
Well, maybe now that the weather's getting nicer, he'll warm up a bit. Remember the old saying, in the spring, a young man's fancy.
Not Mr. Boynton. He's no fancier in the spring than he is in the winter. Oh, that must be Walter Denton to drive me to school. Come on in, Walter. The door's open.
I'll be in the kitchen. Just call me if you want some breakfast.
Breakfast? If I call, just stand guard over lunch and dinner. Oh, good morning, Walter. You're just in time for some breakfast.
Yeah, no, thanks, Miss Brooks. I'm really worried. It's about Harriet Conklin. She's been very cool to me lately. It's this poetry she's been getting.
Poetry? From whom?
Well, that's just the trouble. I don't know who from.
You don't know from whom?
I don't know from nothing. Somebody's been sending her love lyrics like mad. I suspect that the sender of the notes works around the cafeteria.
Why the cafeteria?
Because yesterday, while Harriet wasn't looking, I switched desserts with her, and sure enough, tucked right in the middle of my chocolate eclair, Omar Khayyam. At least I think it was Omar Khayyam.
You mean you're not sure?
Well, it was pretty gooey.
That's Omar Khayyam, all right.
And these are the main points of difference in the circulatory systems of cold and warm-blooded creatures. Well, that'll be all for today.
Excuse me, Mr. Boynton, but you asked me to wait after class?
Oh, yes, Walter. About that note you were scribbling while you should have been listening to my lecture on the North American tree toad. Hand it over.
Oh, but Mr. Boynton, it's personal.
I'm sorry, Walter. I've got to find out what it is that's so much more important to you than the North American tree toad.
Oh, you're all right, Mr. Boynton, but you won't learn much from this.
Now, let's see. Oh, it's a poem. 'Tis but for you that my heart does beat, and over it does repeat. As it says your name, it twists like a lariat, just because your name is Harriet.
Well, Mr. Boynton, now you know it's Harriet Conklin that's more important to me than a North American tree toad.
I didn't mean to embarrass you, Walter. I think our esteemed principal's daughter is a fine girl, and I'm quite fond of poetry myself.
You, Mr. Boynton?
Yes, me. There are things in my life besides toads, too.
Really? What?
One of my favorite bits of verse is quite similar to the one you've written. It goes, your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue, and evermore with love I tremble. And the bell swings, and then your name rings out, and everything you do lives in my heart. Well, Walter, what do you think of it?
It's pretty mushy, if you ask me.
Not at all, Walter. That's one of the loveliest passages in Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac. You'd be surprised how efficacious those lines can be.
I sure would.
Here, I'll write it down for you. I'm sure this will be a great help in your pursuit of the fair Harriet.
Oh, you certainly have beautiful handwriting, Mr. Boynton. Oh, gosh, Harriet practically swoons every time you write the questions on the blackboard.
Well, that's very flattering, Walter. There you are.
Oh, I sure appreciate this, Mr. Boynton. And, gosh, after all the trouble you've gone through already, I'd hate to ask you, but, well, If this works, will you be my best man?
I have sent for you, Miss Brooks, for two reasons.
Yes, Mr. Conklin?
First, I want you to pick up your...
Not yet. Oh, well, here it is. I found it, Mr. Conklin.
Well, good for you. Now, the second thing I want you to do is to change my daughter Harriet's seat in your class.
Oh, why, sir? What's wrong with her present location?
She's right across the aisle from a case of walking arrested development called Walter Denton. Their very proximity has fostered an infantile romance, culminating in Harriet receiving a series of mushy, ridiculous poems.
But, Mr. Conklin, Walter didn't send those poems.
Just move him away from my daughter or vice versa.
But, Mr. Conklin, the poems...
The only poem I'm interested in, Miss Brooks, goes, yours not to reason why, yours but to do or die.
I believe in private enterprise myself.
Good day, Miss Brooks.
But, Mr. Conklin...
I have spoken.
Yes, master, I go. When I left Mr. Conklin's office, I headed for my classroom again.
Hello, Miss Brooks.
Oh, hello, Harriet.
Guess what? I just found another poem smuggled into my history book. And this one is the loveliest one of all. And the most important, too, because I know who said it. I know at last who my secret admirer has been.
Look, Harriet. How do you know?
By his handwriting. Every time I see it on the blackboard, I practically swoon. I've got to let him know I know who he is.
Well, how are you going to do that?
In a very subtle manner, Miss Brooks. I'll just give him back his poem without saying a word. Then he'll know that I know.
Yeah, but Harriet, your father doesn't admire your secret admirer.
Oh, he will. I wish I had an envelope to put this note in, though. I don't want to lose it before I meet him.
You can use this envelope, Harriet. Wait till I take out these report cards. There you are. Now, I'd better be getting into my room, Harriet. I've got to sort these cards before my next class.
Very well, Miss Brooks. And, Miss Brooks,
Yes?
isn't love a wonderful feeling?
It's Dan.
That is.
Andy.
Poor Miss Brooks, in love with the one who loves me. But that's life, I guess. The eternal triangle.
Oh, good morning, Harriet. Have you seen Miss Brooks?
Mr. Boynton! Dear Mr. Boynton. Dear Mr. Boynton. Au revoir, Mr. Boynton.
But, Harriet, just a minute. What's this envelope? For Miss Brooks. Oh, I guess she wants me to give it to her. Funny how kids act sometimes.
Come in.
You busy, Miss Brooks?
Oh, no, Mr. Boynton. I was just sorting these cards.
I just dropped in to tell you how much I'm enjoying the book I borrowed. Of course, what with coaching the basketball team and all, I haven't finished it. But there are several passages in it that really remind me of my youth. I was a romantic kid, all right.
Them were the days.
You might not believe this, but I even wrote poetry. Isn't that silly?
I don't think it's silly at all. But I'm still a little amazed at your interest in such amorous literature.
Maybe you've underestimated me, Miss Brooks.
Underestimated you?
Yes. I almost forgot. This envelope. It's for you. Well, so long, Miss Brooks.
But, Mr. Boynton, what is all this about? What's in here? Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue, and evermore with love I tremble. And the bell swings, and then your name rings out, and everything you do lives in my heart. Why, Mr. Boynton, you underestimated dog, you. Well, lunch period finally arrived, and I hurried into the cafeteria just as Mr. Boynton got there. This, of course, was pure coincidence. The same pure coincidence which has occurred in threat to boycott this cafeteria last week seems to have done some good, doesn't it, Mr. Boynton?
Yes, indeed. They've even put flower pots around on the windowsills. I've just ordered some for my biology lab. They certainly do a lot to relieve the drabness of a schoolroom.
So do you. Aren't flower pots a pretty expensive luxury for a teacher?
Oh, they don't cost anything at all, Miss Brooks. Mr. Conklin gets them through the school nursery. You just tell him how many you want, he signs the requisition, and that's all there is to it. You ought to get a dozen or so for your room. I suggest you request the small-sized pots, Miss Brooks. You'll be surprised how a few flowers will brighten things up. Frankly, when I was in your room this morning, it seemed rather cold.
Cold? For a biologist, you're a pretty bad judge of temperature. But if it's flower pots you want, it's flower pots you'll get. And so I would like a dozen small flower pots for my windowsills. Come in.
Oh, it's me, Stretch Snodgrass. You gotta help me, Miss Brooks. I got a problem.
What's your problem, Stretch?
Well, as you know, Walter Denton is my best friend. And I know he's gone on Harriet Conklin. And even though she's my best friend's girl, I can't help it. I'm gone on her. Even Mr. Boynton has noticed how it's affecting me.
Well, why don't you tell Harriet how you feel about her? I'm sure Mr. Conklin would welcome the change.
Well, I don't want to go with Mr. Conklin. Hey, you see, Miss Brooks, for quite a while now I've been smuggling little notes to her every day without signing them.
Oh, so you're the one.
What one?
The one who's been slipping Omar Khayyam into Harriet's eclairs.
Yeah, that's right. I lost a book somewhere, so I had to make up today's poem myself. That's why I came to you, Miss Brooks. I want you to hear it and tell me if it's okay.
All right, Stretch, go ahead.
To Harriet. Oh, I love the dear silver that ain't in your hair. And the brow that ain't furrowed or wrinkled with care. I kiss the dear fingers, not toil-worn for me. Oh, I love you, dear Harriet.
Well, what's the next line?
Oh, I couldn't think of another original one, so I just put down Mother McCree. Well, Miss Brooks, what's your honest opinion?
My honest opinion, Stretch, is that it's pretty abominable.
No kidding? Hey, that's the very first poem I ever wrote.
That's amazing. I know poets who've written for years without getting that abominable. Look, Stretch, if you want to make a hit with Harriet and get her mind off Walter, which will get Mr. Conklin's mind off me, you'll have to give her a different type of poem.
What do you mean, Miss Brooks?
Well, something like, say, I've got one right here. There, it's all written out for you.
Let's see. Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue, and evermore with love I tremble. Miss Brooks, what's a bell's tongue?
It's right in front of the bell's tonsils. Read the rest of it.
And the bell swings, and then your name rings out, and everything you do lives in my heart.
Well, what do you think of it, Stretch?
Hey, it's keen. What I like about it, it's just the right size to fit into a jelly donut. I'll go right to the cafeteria now.
Oh, wait a minute, Stretch. I'd like you to do something for me first, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, Miss Brooks. What is it?
Well, take this requisition to Mr. Conklin's office, will you?
Oh, sure, right away.
And no detours now. I want those flower pots as soon as possible.
Okay. And thanks for the poem, Miss Brooks.
Oh, but it was Stretch Snodgrass.
Oh, Harriet. Gosh, Harriet, you're just the one I wanted to see. Hey, Harriet, even though you're Walter's girl, well, I can't help it. I just gotta tell you how I feel about you. Harriet, I think you're abominable.
What?
I felt it right...
I'll walk you down to the... Oh, hiya, Stretch.
Hello, Walter. I can't talk to you now. I gotta hurry and deliver a message to Mr. Conklin. So long, Harriet. Bye, everybody.
Well, what's the matter with him?
I don't know. He seems awfully mixed up. He told me I was abominable, and then he gave me this note.
A note? What does it say?
I don't quite understand it. It says, I would like a dozen small flower pots for my windowsills.
Ask Miss Brooks to step into my office immediately, please. Now then, Stretch, you're positive Miss Brooks told you to give this note to me? Yes, Mr. Conklin. I see. That will be all, Stretch. Thank you. Yes, sir. Bye, Mr. Conklin. Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue. And evermore with love I tremble. Now really. Come in.
You sent for me, Mr. Conklin?
Yes, Miss Brooks, I did. Sit down, won't you?
Thank you.
Miss Brooks, I don't know quite how to begin. I received your note, of course, and, well, I never suspected you felt the way you do.
Well, I did decide rather recently, Mr. Conklin.
But, Miss Brooks, you know Mrs. Conklin so well. What do you suppose she'd say?
Well, don't you think she'd like the idea?
Like the idea?
Mr. Conklin, aren't you exaggerating the importance of my little note? It isn't as if I'm asking for the moon. All I want is some little ones.
Little one?
Oh, yes. I've got as much right to them as anybody else, haven't I?
But Miss Brooks...
If a dozen is too many, I'll settle for 6. And if you don't mind, I'd like to have them by the end of the day.
You've been working very hard. And I know conditions here are too good.
Well, conditions aren't too good in any school, Mr. Conklin. That's one of the reasons I want them.
Just let me review this request, Miss Brooks. You say you want 6 little ones by the end of the day?
That's right. I'd like to string them along my windowsill.
String them along your windowsill?
Well, that's better than letting them lie around the nursery, isn't it?
What are you talking about?
Flower pots. I want you to sign the requisition for me.
Requisition? But I didn't get any requisition. Here's what Snodgrass brought me.
Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue.
Excuse me, Daddy, but there's been a terrible mistake.
What are you talking about, Harriet? And why aren't you in class, Benton?
But what's such a mistake, Mr. Conklin?
I guess I got excited. Pardon me, but the door was open, Mr. Conklin, and Mr. Boynton, what is this, a convention? I heard you were called up on the carpet, Miss Brooks, so I thought I'd come by and see if there's anything I can do.
Oh, that's very sweet of you, Mr. Boynton. It's about the poem.
What is going on here? What's all this poem nonsense anyway?
Don't you see, Daddy? Dept gave you the poem he was planning to give me by mistake.
Yeah, but he wasn't the only one that gave Harriet a poem. I did, too. I put one in her history book.
What? I've had about enough of this. Clear out of my office, all of you. Straight here, take this. This poem with Harriet gave it to me. Here.
Walter gave it to me. Here.
Mr. Boynton gave it to me. Here.
Thank you, Walter.
Oh, that was fun. Let's go around again. And the first one that misses gets a date with Bridie Murphy.
Now it's Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden. Well, most women hope to meet the right man someday and settle down for a lifetime of wedded bliss. So it's been with our Miss Brooks, who teaches English at Madison High School. When she first met Mr. Philip Boynton, Madison's biology teacher, she felt that here at last was just what the doctor ordered.
That was 6 years ago, and Mr. Boynton still hasn't read the prescription. In fact, lately I suspected that Mr. Boynton was carrying on a flirtation with someone else. At breakfast Thursday morning, I voiced my suspicions to my landlady.
Connie Brooks, are you inferring that Mr. Boynton has found greener pastures?
I can't tell you whether they're greener or not until I find out where he's grazing. But there's one consolation. I'm not the only female at Madison who's having boyfriend trouble. Several of my girl pupils are complaining, too.
You mean there's an epidemic of infidelity?
An epidemic named Dolores Roberts. She transferred from another school a couple of weeks ago.
Isn't that the girl Walter Denton mentioned the other day? The one he referred to as Madison High's answer to the H-bomb?
That's her, all right. I don't know what school she transferred from, but I'm sure of one thing. They had a whale of a course in manhandling.
My goodness. She sounds like a little pepper pot.
Oh, that must be Walter Denton to pick me up. Come on in, Walter.
He's such a sweet boy.
Good morning, Miss Brooks, Mrs. Davis.
Well, it's Harriet Conklin. This is quite a surprise, Harriet.
Walter called and said he couldn't pick you up this morning, Miss Brooks, so I drove by.
Oh, that was very considerate, Harriet. Would you like something to eat?
Oh, no, thanks. I've had breakfast.
Then if you'll excuse me, I've got to clean up in the kitchen. See you later, dear.
Bye, Mrs. Davis.
I'll just finish this sip of coffee and get ready, Harriet.
Before we go, Miss Brooks, there's something I've got to discuss with you.
Oh, what is it?
It's Walter Denton. I'm worried about that boy.
I don't blame you. The way he eats, he's digging his own...
It's got nothing to do with that, Miss Brooks. It's this new girl, Dolores Roberts. I think he's infatuated with her.
Why should he be an exception? Most of the male youth at Madison are making goo-goo eyes at her. But I wouldn't worry about Walter if I were you, Harriet. I'm sure it's just a passing fancy.
I wish I could be sure of that. But there's only one way I can be, and that's if you'll do me a terrific favor, Miss Brooks.
Me?
Yes. If I talked to Dolores about Walter, it wouldn't do any good. She'd probably just laugh at me. But if you were to discourage her about him...
Now, wait a minute, Harriet. You know I don't like to mix into the personal affairs of any of my students.
But this girl isn't even a real student yet. She's just looking the place over to see if it'll suit her. Oh, you've got to do me this favor, Miss Brooks. After all, you're sophisticated, worldly wise, knowledgeable, charming, beautiful.
I tell you what I'll do, Harriet. You keep talking to me, and I'll keep talking to her.
There's Dolores now, Miss Brooks, in front of the school, in the center of that crowd of boys. Well, I'm going in now, Miss Brooks. Remember, I'm counting on you to straighten things out for me.
Oh, but Harriet,
Good luck, Miss Brooks.
Oh, great. Dolores is in the center, and I'm in the middle. Oh, Dolores. Dolores Roberts.
She's right there, Miss Brooks. Goodbye, boys.
Hello, Miss Brooks. I'm afraid I didn't even see you.
I can't understand it. All you had to do was look through the baseball, hockey, and track teams, and there I was. Now, as a rule, I don't butt into my students' personal life, but since you're new at Madison and your popularity with the boys is so spectacular, I thought it only fair to warn you.
Warn me? About what?
About Walter Denton. Don't you see, Dolores, the quickest way to lose your popularity is by running around with the wrong crowd. And as far as you're concerned, Walter Denton is definitely the wrong crowd.
Miss Brooks, I'm beginning to smell a rat.
Oh, now, he's not that bad.
I think Harriet Conklin put you up to this entire conversation.
Why, Dolores Roberts, how can you make such a fantastically accurate charge? I mean, you mustn't think that I'm trying to...
Excuse me for interrupting, Miss Brooks, but you can just tell Harriet Conklin from me that all's fair in love and war.
Oh, but Dolores...
Harriet should have known better than to ask for help. That's where women like you and me are so superior. Nobody hears you yelping in pain just because Mr. Boynton's been over to see my mother every night this past week.
Yikes! He's been over to see your mother?
Yes. Didn't you know?
No, Dolores, I didn't. But as you say, all's fair in love and war. Well, after learning that Mr. Boynton had spent every evening of the past week with the mother of Dolores, men are such children, Roberts, I was about ready to hit the ceiling, preferably with Mr. Boynton's head. But when I met him for lunch in the school cafeteria, I had calmed down considerably. And it was apparent that he wanted to be forgiven for breaking our date on the previous night.
I'm sorry I broke that date with you last night, Miss Brooks, but it was unavoidable. After all, when somebody new comes to your town, you want to make them feel at home.
You want to make them feel at home. I want to make them wish they'd stayed home. Oh, I know you've been seeing Dolores Roberts' mother.
Well, the truth of the matter is that I've been giving Mrs. Roberts driving lessons.
Well, not that I'm interested, but what happened after you were through giving her lessons?
Well, somehow or other, we just seemed to wind up in her living room.
Oh, I see. First you give lessons, then you get lessons. That is, going to someone's living room to finish your driving instruction doesn't seem like a necessity to me.
With Phoebe, it is. Well, this isn't fair, Miss Brooks. Actually, Mrs. Roberts doesn't mean a thing to me.
I'll bet she doesn't, good old Phoebe.
Now, please, you should know that when it comes to anything really important, the first person I think of is you.
You do, Mr. Boynton?
Of course I do. Take tonight, for instance. I've got something of an extremely personal nature to attend to, and you're the only one I'd ever ask to help me.
Oh, really, Mr. Boynton? What do you want me to do tonight?
Well, Millie, one of my favorite white mice, died yesterday. I thought you'd help me bury her.
You romantic fool, you. Well, you picked the right assistant. Connie Brooks, the friendly undertaker.
Now, don't tease me about it. I was very fond of that mouse, and she died in the interest of science.
Well, where are you going to bury her?
In that little patch of ground behind the athletic field. You know, where I put Agnes and Mabel, all the guinea pigs and mice whom I consider martyrs to the march of science. But I'm practically finished, and you're not even touching your lunch, Miss Brooks.
There's something about this conversation that's not conducive to eating a cheese sandwich. Tell me, Mr. Boynton, does Mr. Conklin know about this secret burial plot of yours?
Oh, certainly not, Miss Brooks. He'd never condone using school property for such a purpose. As a matter of fact, he's getting a bit suspicious. He came by my lab only this morning and wanted to know what the shovel was doing there.
What did you tell him? You were waiting for a gold rush?
No, I just said I was going to do some planting.
Well, that beats lying. Looks like we're having company for lunch. Walter Denton's coming over.
Salutations, most erudite faculty members.
Never mind the flattery, Walter. Your final exams will still be judged on their merits.
Oh, there's nothing like building up a little backlog of goodwill. Well, I completed the wooden box for Millie in shop class, Mr. Boynton.
Oh, thanks a lot, Walter. Miss Brooks is going to help out tonight, too. Now, if you'll both excuse me for a moment, I'm going to get some milk. You want something, Miss Brooks?
No, I've still got this donut to toy with, Mr. Boynton. Thanks.
I'll see you later, then.
Swell guy, Mr. Boynton. Salt of the earth.
Yes, he has been a little salty lately. Which reminds me, Walter, I hear you're something of a Don Juan yourself these days.
Don Juan? Me?
You're not going to deny your interest in a certain Dolores Roberts, are you?
Deny it? Ay, Dolores. Hell dish.
So you are smitten.
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm smitten. It's just that whenever she comes near me, my undershirt crawls up and down my back like a Venetian blind.
Well, that's a good way to judge a girl's appeal. Look, Walter, you'll have to excuse me now. I see Harriet leaving the cafeteria, and I want a word with her before she goes.
Oh, better you than me, Miss Brooks. Harriet's a bit miffed at me these days, but I'll make it up to her after she cools off.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, Walter. See you later.
Okay, Miss Brooks, and thanks for being so understanding.
It's my specialty. Harriet Conklin.
Oh, hi, Miss Brooks. How did you make out in your little talk with Dolores this morning?
All I accomplished, Harriet, was to find out that you and I are in the same boat. Mr. Boynton's been going with the mother and Walter with the daughter.
Well, listen, Miss Brooks, we've got to put our heads together and think of a way out. Can I come over to your place tonight?
Tonight? No, Harriet, I've got something to do tonight. I'm helping Mr. Boynton bury Millie.
Beg pardon?
It's his latest scientific casualty. Millie's a white mouse, and I promised I'd help him bury her next to Agnes and Mabel behind the athletic field. Oh, but you mustn't breathe a word of this to your father. He doesn't know about it.
Oh, don't worry, Miss Brooks. I won't tell Daddy anything. If Mr. Boynton's going to... Wait a minute. I've got it. I think I've got the perfect plan.
What is it, Harriet?
I'll tell you later, Miss Brooks. What an idea. What an idea. Are you sure we're alone in the house, Mrs. Roberts?
Why, yes, Harriet. Why?
Well, I don't like to barge in on people like this, but since you're new in town and you've been seeing Mr. Boynton, I thought I'd better put you on your guard.
On my guard?
Yes. I wouldn't want you to end up the way Agnes and Millie and the other women in his life did.
What are you talking about? What happened to them?
That's what the FBI would like to know.
The FBI?
In the past 5 years, almost every woman who's gone out with Mr. Boynton has disappeared.
Well, this is preposterous. Someone must have some notion as to where those women can be found.
Oh, we've got a notion, all right, but I'm afraid you'd have to dig up half the athletic field to prove anything. However, you could prove something to yourself tonight.
Tonight? How?
Well, as I say, his latest girlfriend, Millie, disappeared just a few days ago. And this morning I heard Mr. Boynton say he had a little work to do behind the athletic field tonight. So, a word to the wise, Mrs. Roberts.
A word to the wise. What an idea. What an idea.
Hello, Principal's office. Osgood Conklin himself speaking. Who? Oh, what can I do for you, Mrs. Roberts? What? What do I know about Mr. Boynton's private life? Well, outside of the fact that he's going with one of our teachers, a Miss Brooks, I'm afraid I don't know anything. What's that? Has she disappeared? No such luck. I mean, of course she hasn't disappeared. Who? Agnes? Millie? You've never mentioned them to me. Why? They've all vanished. But what happened to them? Oh, I see. He buried them all near the athletic field. Well, that's a very simple matter. He buried them all near the athletic field! But, Mrs. Roberts, this is positive. Wait a minute. He did have a shovel in his laboratory this morning. I bet... What? Tonight? Yes, of course, Mrs. Roberts. What an idea. What an idea.
Well, because of Harriet Conklin's little story, Mrs. Roberts and Mr. Conklin suspected that they might have a Bluebeard in their midst. A Bluebeard who's been burying his victims all over the school athletic field. However, later that night, all that Miss Brooks and Mr. Boynton are doing is burying his pet mouse, Millie.
There, we're almost finished. Now I'll just smooth out this dirt a bit.
Well, if you'll excuse me a minute, Mr. Boynton, I'd like to look for a stone to mark Millie's final resting place.
Well, good idea, Miss Brooks. I'll have this job done by the time you're back. My buddy, your buddy. Just a few more pats.
Well, good evening, Boynton.
Mr. Conklin, what are you doing here at this time of night?
My question exactly, Boynton. What are you doing here at this time of night?
Well, sir, now that you've caught me with the goods, so to speak, I might as well confess the truth. I'm burying Millie.
Burying Millie? And it's true.
Well, I didn't think you'd really mind, Mr. Conklin.
You didn't what?
Well, I meant once you got used to the idea.
Boynton, do you mean to tell me?
I found a rock almost... Why, Mr. Conklin.
Miss Brooks, what are you doing here?
Well,
It's all right, Miss Brooks. Mr. Conklin knows about it. Of course, as I suspected, he doesn't wholly approve of what I'm doing.
Doesn't wholly approve. I abhor what you're doing. But is Miss Brooks in on this, too?
Oh, sure. I usually help him with the digging.
Usually? Then there were others besides Millie.
Oh, yes, at least a dozen.
A dozen?
Well, I hate to quibble with you, Miss Brooks, but I'd say there are closer to 2 dozen scattered around here.
2 dozen? Buried under my athletic field? Boynton, why? Why did you do it?
Well, you couldn't expect him to leave them lying around his lab, could you?
Oh, quiet! Don't you feel any remorse, Boynton?
Well, naturally, sir. When you're as close to them as I was, you hate to see them go.
Particularly this last one, Millie, with her fuzzy white ears and beady little eyes.
Oh, she certainly was a lively one, all right.
I'll say she was lively. Couldn't keep her still a minute. She was always hopping all over the place. But, I think Agnes and Harry were just as cute.
Harry? Yes, we were wild about Harry.
And Harry was wild about...
Oh, silence! Yes, this man doesn't care whom he poisons.
Well, Mr. Boynton.
Hello, Mrs. Roberts.
Keep your eye on the road, Phoebe.
It isn't true about Millie and the others, is it, Mr. Conklin?
Gosh, do you know about it, too? Bad news sure travels fast.
I'm afraid it is true, Mrs. Roberts.
If you're here to help with the digging, you're too late.
Who is this?
This is Miss Brooks. She assists him.
Well, it's so unbelievable. How many were there?
He says 24.
24.
Give a dozen, take a dozen.
Well, I can't believe that...
Hello, everyone. Oh, Mr. Conklin, Mrs. Roberts. What are you doing here?
Never mind that, Denton. What are you doing here?
Oh, I came over to see if I could lend a hand.
You mean you know what's going on, too?
Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yeah, I consider it a privilege to study under a master like Mr. Boynton. In fact, I am seriously considering following in his footsteps.
This is beyond belief.
Oh, and to think I let my little girl go out with this monster. Well, I've heard all I need to. I'm removing my daughter from this school immediately, Mr. Conklin.
Oh, but Mrs.
I
Roberts...
wouldn't risk her life on my own with these fiends another minute. And as far as I'm concerned, if we can leave this town by tomorrow, we'll do it. Good night.
Mrs. Roberts, wait.
Oh, let her go, Mr. Conklin. She's too excitable.
Too excitable!
Well, she must be to carry on that way about a few white mice and guinea pigs.
White mice and... You mean that's what you've been burying out here? White mice and guinea pigs?
What did you think we were burying? People? You don't have to answer that question, Mr. Conklin. We know that's what you thought. And Mrs. Roberts thinks the same thing.
Well, if that's the case, I've got to stop her, tell her the truth.
Oh, no, you don't. Your daughter Harriet concocted this idea because she didn't like the attention Walter was paying to Dolores. If you try to explain to Mrs. Roberts now, she'll think you were in on the scheme.
Me? But why should she think that?
Why? All together, boys. Because that's what we'll tell her.
Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden, was produced and directed by Larry Burns, written by Arthur Arlsberg and Al Lewis with the music of Lud Bluskin. Mr. Conklin was played by Gail Gordon. This program came to you from the Frankfurt studios of the American Forces Network Europe and was prepared for rebroadcast over this network by specialist Rich Kuhlman.
Well, to hear the students in her class talk, one might think that our Miss Brooks was the only female English teacher at Madison High School, but this isn't so.
No, there are several English teachers at Madison, of whom 5 are ladies. Then there's Miss Enright. For almost 6 years now, we've been waging what might be termed romantic warfare. Objective, biology teacher Philip Boynton. Knowing Mr. Boynton's passion for food, I scored a strategic victory early last week when I invited Mr. Boynton to dinner on Thursday night. He accepted, so bright and early Thursday morning, I called the butcher and ordered a pot roast. And that is Mr. Boynton's favorite dish. And that includes me and Miss Enright. Well, after dressing, I hastened into the breakfast room and greeted my landlady. Good morning, Mrs. Davis. I'm all ready to break bread with you.
You won't have to, Connie. It comes sliced. Now sit down and drink your juice, dear.
What kind of juice is this, Mrs. Davis?
It's artichoke juice.
Artichoke juice?
Yes, I bought it in the new health food department in the market this morning. I also ordered some delicious steaks from them.
What kind of steaks?
They're perfect replicas of New York cuts.
Replicas?
Actually, they're made out of soybeans and watercress. But you can never tell the difference.
Believe me, I could tell the difference.
Oh, Connie, there's something I must tell you. When I was in the market this morning, I met Miss Enright.
Oh? What did the delightful Daisy have to relate?
Well, she told me she was ordering just for herself. She was planning a lonely dinner for one. That's when she told me how fortunate I am. And she paid you a lovely compliment.
A compliment?
Yes. She said, Mrs. Davis, you don't know how lucky you are to have someone to dine with every night, even if it's only Miss Brooks.
What a doll.
I felt so sorry for the poor thing. I invited her over here for dinner tonight.
What? But, Mrs. Davis, she probably knew I'd invited Mr. Boynton over here tonight. Don't you see, she deliberately wangled this invitation out of you.
But, Connie, she didn't seem to be wangling.
Well, that's the beauty of experience. When a wangler like Miss Enright wangles you, you don't suspect any wangling until you've been wangled.
But, Connie, I talked her into canceling her own order at the market, invited her here. You'll just have to share your pot roast with her.
Well, what's done is done, I guess. But between you and me, Mrs. Davis, with the pot Daisy Enright's got, she doesn't need my roast. I don't like to appear overly nervous, Walter, but do you think you could restrain the speed of this demon jalopy just a little?
For you, I'll put it in reverse, Miss Brooks.
Oh, please don't. We're terrifying enough going forward.
Miss Brooks, inasmuch as my regard for you transcends the mere respect of pupil for teacher, I would like to take the liberty of remarking that I detect in your manner this morning a vague discontent. A discontent based on some occurrence in the immediate past or discernible future. Now, we all know that women are funny.
They're a scream. Of course, some are funnier than others.
Yeah. And by funny, we don't always mean comical, do we? Particularly when we speak of one Daisy Enright.
Where have you been this morning? To a seance?
No, ma'am. No, to the market. There, I helped my mother with some shopping. And there we ran into Miss Enright, who told my mother she was dining at your place tonight. Now, knowing the overwhelming absence of affection you two feel for each other, I figured out that you must have a date with Mr. Boynton, and that she wangled an invitation from Mrs. Davis, who was also in the market. QED, you are discontented.
Walter, have you ever considered a career in espionage?
Well, it was a simple deduction, Miss Brooks. Now, let us follow this dilemma to a more satisfactory conclusion. And knowing that you wish to be alone with Mr. Boynton tonight, may I suggest that you invite me to dinner, too?
Invite you to dinner, too?
Why, you ask? Well, I'll tell you why. Because when you want to take a stroll in the garden with Mr. Boynton, or turn on the radio and dance with Mr. Boynton, I can keep Miss Enright completely embroiled in a maze of fascinating, albeit meaningless, conversation.
Well,
You might not believe this, Miss Brooks, but I have it in my power to keep up an almost constant flow of gibberish, calculated to send the most bovine of listeners into a state of panic, wherein fleeing the premises is only one of the lesser manifestations of shock. Am I invited?
Be there at 7, tie optional. Thanks for the hitch, Walter. If you'll excuse me now, I've got to make a stop before I go into my own class.
Yes, ma'am. The biology lab is just 3 doors down.
Thank you, Rand McNally.
Hello, Miss Brooks. Good morning, Walter.
Oh, hi, Harriet, dear. Guess what happened? Miss Brooks has invited me to join Miss Enright and Mr. Boynton and herself for dinner tonight.
But, Walter, what about our date for tonight?
Date? Oh, dear, I forgot about that. I looked into my wallet this morning and our date completely slipped my mind.
Oh, golly, Walter, you don't have to spend any money on me. Besides, we could still be together if a certain party were kind enough to invite me to dinner also.
Oh, of course, we'd love to have you, Harriet.
Oh, gee, thanks, Miss Brooks.
I was walking along, minding my business. Well, you're welcome, Harriet.
May I ask the nature of the convention outside my office?
Miss Brooks just invited me to dinner, Daddy.
I see. Well, send her in immediately, please.
Yes, Daddy. Won't you go into Daddy's office, please, Miss Brooks?
All right, Harriet. I'll see you later, everybody. You wanted to see me, Miss Conklin?
I've been holding my breath. Miss Brooks, across the hall and 3 doors to the right is a door. This door leads into a room. What is this room, Miss Brooks?
That's the biology laboratory, sir.
That's what I thought. As you should know by now, within the confines of this institution, I do not approve of fraternization between faculty members of the opposite sex. Now then, it's quite simple. Mr. Boynton is a man. You are a woman.
Sir, you didn't tell Mr. Boynton.
No, I thought I'd better wait until he's a bit older.
Oh, good. A thing like that can make quite an impression.
Oh, quiet!
Well, I know how you stand on this question, Mr. Conklin, but if you'll forgive me, sir, I don't think it's fair. After all, you yourself are a married man. You don't know the meaning of loneliness.
That's beside the point, and also not quite factual. My wife spends a good deal of her time with ladies' clubs and bridge. In fact, just today she informed me that she's going to dinner with some local group or other, that I shall be, as she so winsomely puts it, on my own.
Well, I'm sorry about that, sir.
Once
but I don't...
again, my little daughter shall be dependent upon her daddy to look after her. And her daddy shall look after her, Miss Brooks. I'm planning on having dinner with Harriet.
But, Mr. Conklin, Harriet's been invited to dinner at my house.
I know. What are we having for dinner, Miss
Huh?
I said, what are we having?
Just the biggest crowd you ever saw, Daddy. At noon, I entered the school cafeteria, and as luck would have it, I spied Mr. Boynton just sitting down at a table across the room. Having nothing better to do, I sauntered over. Hi, Mr. Boynton. Mind if I sit down?
Oh, not at all, Miss Brooks.
There's something I have to tell you.
Oh, yes?
Well, due to a misunderstanding on Mrs. Davis's part, we won't be dining alone.
We won't?
No, she invited someone else this morning, and this, in turn, set off a rather disturbing chain reaction. As it winds up, I'm having quite a dinner party.
Oh, well, I hope you don't misunderstand, Miss Brooks, but I'm genuinely disappointed. In fact, I'm chagrined.
Honestly, Mr. Boynton?
Yes, indeed. Quite a blow to learn that others are going to be present tonight. I'd rather hope that we'd be alone, Miss Brooks. Just you and me.
Just you and me?
Yeah, that's right. If it were just the 2 of us, we could split the pot roast.
You romantic fool, you. I can't wait until the night we whack up a salami in Capri. But, Mr. Boynton...
Well, salami doesn't agree with me very well.
Oh, forget it, Mr. Boynton. It was just a long, thin figure of speech. I thought I'd tell you who was invited. There'll be Walter Denton and Harriet Conklin and, of course, Mr. Conklin.
Why Mr. Conklin?
Because his wife's going to a hen party and left Harriet in his care, and I invited Harriet.
But who invited Mr. Conklin?
Mr. Conklin. But, Mr. Boynton, there's one more person I haven't mentioned yet. Miss Enright will be present, too.
Miss Enright? Well, say, that won't be so bad.
It won't, huh?
No, I don't think she goes much for pot roast.
Well, it could be worse, I suppose. I might be serving lamb chops, and with those little pants on them, I know she'd go for those. You know, what really annoys me about the entire affair is the way Miss Enright wangled her invitation out of Mrs. Davis.
Well, what did she do?
Right in Hirsch's meat market, she did everything but the death scene from Camille.
Well, I can't say that I see anything wrong in a woman employing a bit of innocent deception to attain her end.
I wish I could attain her end.
Well, actually, it shows that she has ingenuity. She's using her gray matter. Now, these actions clearly indicate that Miss Enright's a thinker.
Closer you'll never come. But let's forget about Miss Enright.
That may not be so easy. She's heading this way with her lunch tray.
Oh, maybe if we're real quiet, she'll go on by.
Yoo-hoo, Mr. Boynton. Mind if I join you?
Oh, certainly not, Miss Enright. Oh, let me pull up a chair for you.
Oh, don't bother. I'll just shove the old laundry bag off this chair. And... Oh, it's you, Miss Brooks. Oh, how are you today, you dear, dear person?
Divine, darling.
You don't mind if I sit down, do you?
Oh, not at all. Pull up a wide chair and squat.
If you ladies will excuse me for a moment, I'm going to get myself a cup of coffee. I see you got yours, Miss Enright. How about you, Miss Brooks? Would you like a cup?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Boynton. I'd love one.
Fine.
I said I'd like some coffee, Mr. Boynton.
Yes, I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here.
Thanks. I'll be back in a jiffy.
Oh, what a lovely relationship exists between you and Mr. Boynton, my dear. I bet it makes you glow all over to bask in the warmth of his frugality. Well, let's not quibble. We're to be dinner companions this evening, hmm?
Well, we're eating under the same roof, if that's what you mean.
Oh, don't be bitter, darling. By the way, I'm happy to see you're keeping yourself in good physical condition. I clocked you in 4 seconds flat in your sprint across the cafeteria just now.
Was that handily or breezing?
You don't mind my saying so, your workout had repercussions, darling. You're about to lose a heel.
Oh, are you leaving so soon? Oh, you mean on my shoe?
Yes. The left one. It's splitting, see? Right below that spot where your stockings slop over the top.
Well, thanks, Miss Enright. And if I may return the favor, you seem to have a rather wide run in your stocking. The right one.
Me?
Oh, you're not wearing stockings. Sorry. Look, Miss Enright, we may not be overly fond of each other, but we're adult human beings. This verbal hair-pulling is rather childish.
Oh, here you are, Miss Brooks.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Boynton.
Well, Miss Enright, are you all ready for our little dinner party at Miss Brooks' place tonight?
Mr. Boynton, I'm looking forward to it with bated breath.
Is that cut bait or live bait?
It'll be nice to have a home-cooked meal for a change. Last night I dined at the Zenith drugstore.
The Zenith? That's where you took me last Saturday, isn't it?
Yes, but I don't think I'm going to patronize them anymore. They charge 70 cents for roast beef.
70 cents? Well, that's funny. I had roast beef when we were there, and it only cost me 60 cents.
Well, that night, the part of Madison High who had invited themselves to dinner arrived at Miss Brooks' house.
Well, here we are, folks.
You certainly made good time, Walter.
Yeah, how'd you like the trip, Mr. Conklin?
I've never been on one like it, Denton.
Oh, thank you, sir.
I hope never to go on another. Come on, I see Miss Brooks is waiting at her front door for her.
Hi, Miss Brooks. It's nice of you to meet us at the door like this.
Huh? Oh, hello, folks. I'm not really meeting you. I'm just looking for my key. I'm a little late getting home.
That's okay, Miss Brooks.
Well, I trust this won't delay our dinner. I'm hungry enough to eat a bear.
I hope you're not disappointed, Mr. Conklin. They were all out of bear meat at the market. But Mrs. Davis told me on the phone that she'd have the pot roast ready by 6:30 sharp. Let's see. Now, here's my key. Oh, there we are. Now, just hang your hats and coats on this hall tree, will you?
I'll take care of them, Miss Brooks.
Yes, you'd better get back to the kitchen and add your magic touch to the forthcoming repast.
It's 6:15. When are the others coming?
Well, Mr. Boynton said he'd be here at 6:15 sharp.
And Mr. Boynton's very prompt as a rule.
Oh, yes, indeed. You can usually set your watch by Mr. Boynton. Oh, welcome, Mr. Boynton. Come on in.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Hello, Mr. Boynton.
Hiya, Mr. Boynton.
Did you bring your customarily outsized appetite along tonight, Boynton?
My outsized appetite?
Oh, now, this is going to be a gay little dinner party, everybody. Let's not snarl at each other until we smell blood.
Oh, that must be Miss Enright.
I'll get it. Oh, come in, Miss Enright.
Good evening, Miss Brooks. Hello, all.
Hi, Miss
Good
Enright.
evening, Miss Enright.
Well, suppose you and Harriet set the table now, Miss Enright. I'd like to give Mrs. Davis a hand.
Fine, Miss Brooks.
You'll find dishes and silverware in the cabinet, Walter. List everything out for the girls, will you?
Sure, Miss Brooks. You go right ahead.
Well, let's sit down in the living room, Mr. Conklin, shall we?
I suppose so. I hope these preparations don't take too long.
Can I do anything to make you comfortable, Mr. Boynton?
Yeah, Mr. Boynton's as comfortable as he's going to get, Miss Enright. I need you over here, if you don't mind, please.
Yes, give us a hand with these dishes, won't you?
Oh, very well. See, Mr. Boynton, what a domestic little mouse I am.
You take this cheese dish, Miss Enright.
Well, make it snappy, everybody. It's almost 6:30.
Oh, excuse me, folks, but I'm afraid I have a rather depressing bulletin.
What's wrong, Miss Brooks?
The pot roast hasn't even been started yet. It'll take hours to cook.
What manner of grim jest is this? Where's Mrs. Davis?
She's gone, Mr. Conklin, but she left me this note. I'll read it to you. It says, Dear Connie, as you know, my sister Angela's niece Wilma has been expecting a baby. Well, it just arrived, and since you are the godmother and Wilma's husband is on the road, I think she would feel better if you joined us at the hospital immediately. Yours in haste, Mrs. Davis.
What colossal nerve. Having a baby at a time like this.
Oh, it can't be helped, I suppose. But what are you going to do, Miss Brooks?
What can I do but join them as soon as I phone the hospital? Would you drive me over, Mr. Boynton?
Oh, I guess I'll have to. But I must admit I'm terribly disappointed, Miss Brooks.
Well, this is a fine dinner party.
Oh, I don't know. All's well that ends well. I mean, come on, Mr. Conklin. I'll drive you and Harriet home.
You won't get me in that jazzed-up hearse again. Miss Enright, your car has 4 wheels. You will take us home.
But, Mr. Conklin, maybe I should stay with Mr.
That's an order, Miss Enright.
Yes, sir.
Come, Harriet.
All right, Daddy. Follow us home, Walter. I'll cook us dinner. Good night, Miss Brooks.
Good night, Harriet.
Good night, Miss Brooks. Mr.
Good
Boynton.
night.
Better luck next time, darling.
Well, I'm ready, Miss Brooks. As soon as you call the hospital, we can go... Hey, what's the reason for that meditative look in your eye?
Remember this afternoon at lunch? You said you couldn't see anything wrong in a woman employing a bit of deception to gain her end.
Yes. Well, what has that got to do with
Excuse me a moment, Mr. Boynton. Oh, Mrs. Davis.
Yes, Connie, what is it?
Wheel out the pot roast and call me Mata Hari.
Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden, was produced and directed by Larry Burns, written by Arthur Alsberg and Al Lewis, with the music of Lud Bluskin. Mr. Conklin was played by Gail Gordon. This program came to you from the Frankfurt studios of the American Forces Network Europe and was prepared for rebroadcast over this network by specialist Ed Barron.
For your entertainment and pleasure, here is Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden.
Our Miss Brooks, who teaches English at Madison High School, has always hoped that someday she would head her department. But with Mrs. Emma Finch holding down the job for the past 5 years, it didn't look like Connie Brooks would ever get a crack at it until last week.
It was right before the final exams that Mr. Conklin, our principal, told me Mrs. Finch was not only retiring from the position, but actually leaving the school. When I asked him why, he blushed and replied, because it's best for all concerned. Oddly enough, it was our bashful biology teacher, Mr. Boynton, who finally told me the reason. We were alone in his laboratory at the time, and he said, Miss Brooks, Mrs. Finch is going to have a B.A.B.Y. I guess he put it that way so as not to embarrass some young rabbits who were listening. Anyway, Friday morning at breakfast, I was talking to my landlady, Mrs. Davis, about it. Well, what do you think, Mrs. Davis? Do you suppose I'll get the job?
I can't see any reasons why you shouldn't, Connie.
Honestly? But can you see any reasons why I should, Mrs. Davis?
No, I can't see any of those either. It's up to Mr. Conklin to recommend the new department head to the Board of Education, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, how do you stand with him?
How do you mean, Mrs. Davis?
Have you been courteous, cooperative, obedient, and respectful?
No. And maybe I better forget the whole thing. Of course, it's not entirely up to Mr. Conklin's opinion of me personally. My work's got something to do with it, hasn't it?
Frankly, Connie, your work should have everything to do with it.
That's what I say. Maybe I better forget the whole thing.
Are there any other English teachers at Madison who have been there as long as you have?
Let's see. Yes, Miss Enright's been there about the same length of time, and she's been quite friendly with the Conklins, too. Of course, I have Mr. Conklin's daughter, Harriet, in my class, and we're great friends. Then that wouldn't influence Mr. Conklin any. Although Harriet's a pretty good pupil, thank goodness, and her marks have all been exceptionally high. That might count for something with the old. I wonder if he'll make his decision right away. He might leave the position open for a while. I wish I knew. But then there's no sense in brooding about it. I'm either to be head of the department or I'm not to be.
Oh, thanks for reminding me, Connie. I must get 2 tickets for Hamlet today. I promised my sister Angela I'd take her to see it. Of course, even if I forgot about it, she'd probably never even mention it. She's so absent-minded, poor thing. The older she gets, the more forgetful she is.
How old is she now, Mrs. Davis?
Who?
Your sister.
Which one?
Angela, the absent-minded one.
Oh, she's in the low 70s.
That's pretty good golf for an old lady.
Oh, Angela's not half as bad as my brother Victor. He's so forgetful sometimes. Why, do you know, Connie, he can be talking to you about something and right in the middle of the sentence get off on another topic altogether.
Really?
Yes, it's quite disconcerting, but I guess it's just something that scrambled, boiled, or fried, Connie.
Well, I suppose you just have to... What?
Your eggs, dear. How would you like them?
I'd like them introduced into the conversation a little earlier. But now that you bring it up, Mrs. Davis, I'll take them any way you want yours.
Good. Then we'll both have oatmeal.
That's the only way to eat eggs. Where's the coffee, Mrs. Davis?
Right here, Connie. I'll pour you some.
Thanks. You know, it isn't just the extra salary that makes me so anxious to head the English department. It's the additional income.
How much of a raise will you get, Connie?
Oh, I'm not certain of the exact amount, Mrs. Davis, but it's well over $9 a month. Just think, I won't have to put newspapers in my shoes when the soles wear out. Now I can use magazine paper.
You mentioned a Miss Enright before, Connie. Is that the rather snooty teacher you told me about?
That's her, Mrs. Davis. And if she gets that job as head of the English department, she'll be impossible. For she walks around the school now as if she's inspecting the stockyards. The way she talks to people. Why, darling, you look positively chic. I mean, just too terribly soigné. It's sickening.
Oh, then don't eat any more oatmeal, dear. Just finish your coffee.
You've been derailed again, Mrs. Davis. Let me help you back on the track. I'm talking about Miss Enright, a rival English teacher. She's got me worried.
Oh, don't worry about her, Connie. I'm sure her baby will be a fine, healthy specimen.
She isn't the one who's going to have the baby, Mrs. Davis.
Well, that's a shame. I think the mother should always take care of her own baby, no matter what.
It's Mrs. Finch who's having the baby.
Who?
Mrs. Finch.
Oh, well, that's a very nice name for a baby. Now, if you'll excuse me, Connie, I'd better clean up the dishes.
All right, Mrs. Davis, you clean up the dishes, and I'll clean up the conversation by myself. I'd help you in the kitchen, but I've got to get ready to go to school. Walter Denton's picking me up any minute.
Oh, Walter's such a nice boy. It's a pity he's not a more brilliant student. But I think I know what his trouble is, Connie. Lack of concentration.
Concentration?
Yes. If he would just concentrate on one subject at a time. You see, he's the kind of a boy who... Well, he's the type that... Connie?
Yes?
What were we talking about?
Walter Denton.
Oh, he's picking you up this morning, isn't he? What happened to your car, Connie? You just got it out of the repair shop.
I know, Mrs. Davis, but I took it out the night of the big freeze.
And?
It froze. I did try to warm it up a little. I poured some boiling water into the radiator, but then the engine made the strangest sound.
What kind of a sound, Connie?
Well, I may be wrong, Mrs. Davis, but I'd swear it said, "Why don't you get yourself a bicycle?" I'm glad you picked me up a little early this morning, Walter. Today may be a very important day in my life.
Well, the importance of today or any day in your life, Miss Brooks, is only exceeded by your importance to your adoring pupils, of which, if I may be so bold, I consider myself one of the most worshipful and reverent.
Amen. Thank you, Walter.
There's things about you, Miss Brooks, character traits, I guess you'd call them, which are not to be found in any other teachers I've ever come into contact with. I just know that you are an eminently fair person. I also know that you're kind, gentle, and considerate of those who may not possess the superior mentality which is obviously your birthright.
What else do you know, Walter?
That today you're giving us the final exams in English.
I thought you were a little over-smitten with me this morning.
Oh, I'm not trying to influence you to give me a better mark. Oh, no, I'd bend over backwards rather than curry favor. But I've actually studied for this test, Miss Brooks. Even Saturday, when Harriet dragged me to the movies, I took my books right up to the balcony with me.
What were you studying, Romeo and Juliet?
You're kidding me, Miss Brooks, but I'm serious. I really crammed in that movie.
But how could you read in the dark?
Oh, it isn't always dark. They have a 3-minute intermission between pictures.
Well, that's plenty of time, especially if you were studying in shorthand.
Of course, not knowing exactly what the questions are going to be about makes it a little tougher.
Naturally.
It's sort of a strain on a student not to know approximately the nature of the questions he should expect.
That's true.
And just because a student has been fortunate enough to make a personal contact with a teacher whom he not only admires and respects as a person, but whose integrity and honesty as an instructor he holds in such high esteem, there's no reason for him to presume that just because he drives her to school faithfully and promptly, she would relinquish just one tiny iota of that integrity and slip him a little advance information about the test.
You're so right, Walter.
I knew you'd react that way, Miss Brooks, but I just wouldn't have felt completely honest with myself if I didn't try to chisel a tip or two. Anyway, now that you've dummied up about the tests, maybe we...
Excuse me, Walter. Now that I've what?
Dummied up. It's a synonym of clammed up. When I don't want anyone to know something about something I know about, I always clam up.
And you're the chowderhead who can do it. But, Walter, when I mentioned much earlier in the trip that this was an important day, I wasn't referring to the final exams.
You weren't?
No, I was thinking of Mrs. Finch.
Oh, the head of the English department.
The ex-head of the English department, Walter. Mrs. Finch is leaving Madison.
Why?
Because she's... well, Mrs. Finch is going to become a mother.
Of who?
Now, that's a fair question. Of her son or daughter, as the case may be.
I didn't know Mrs. Finch had any son or daughter.
Walter, you're not related to Mrs. Davis, are you? Oh, no. No, of course not. She's just absent-minded. Look, Walter, what concerns me at the moment is whether or not I have a chance to replace Mrs. Finch as head of the department.
A chance? Why, you're a standout, Miss Brooks. You've been teaching at Madison long enough to be the principal. I mean, Mr. Conklin should certainly choose you over anybody else.
How about Miss Enright?
Oh, gee, I forgot about her. Now, she's even older than you are, isn't she? Oh, in point of service, that is.
Oh, I'm glad you tagged that on, Walter. Nobody could be older than me in years. Not this morning, anyway.
Now, don't you worry about it, Miss Brooks. So why don't you see Mr. Conklin when we get to school and have a little chat with him? You know, turn on the charm, sort of.
You mean butter him up?
Butter him up?
Yes, and don't sound so innocent, Walter. After the job you did on me this morning, you should get a prize from the Dairymen's Association.
starring Eve Arden, will continue in just a moment. But first,
The innermost thoughts of the second Mrs. Burton are yours to share as you follow her life story each Monday through Friday over most of these same stations. And like all of the people you meet in CBS Radio's daytime dramas, the second Mrs. Burton is someone whose thoughts and feelings are worth knowing. Burdened by the shadows of her husband's first marriage and often in conflict with her strong-willed mother-in-law, the second Mrs. Burton meets each new problem that stands in the way of happiness with courage and with intelligence, too. Tomorrow and every Monday through Friday, follow the engrossing story of the second Mrs. Burton. Remember, you'll meet her right here on CBS Radio, where Wendy Warren, young Dr. Malone, our gal Sunday, backstage wife, Nora Drake, and Ma Perkins, along with the folks on The Road of Life, The Romance of Helen Trent, and The Right to Happiness, all add drama and excitement to your daytime listening. That's on CBS Radio, of course.
Well, here we are, Miss Brooks. Good old Madison High. You know, every time I look at these hallowed walls, I wish for just one thing.
What's that, Walter?
I wish I was still home in bed. Especially today with those finals coming up. Gosh, Miss Brooks, isn't there some little suggestions you could make to me so I'd pass the exam?
Certainly there is, Walter. Answer the questions correctly.
Yeah. Well, you better get off here, Miss Brooks, and I'll go park the car.
All right, Walter. Thanks for the lift. And good luck today.
Oh, thank you, Miss Brooks. And good luck to Mr. Conklin.
Well, I'll probably need it. I hope he's in a good mood this morning. Although why this morning should be any better...
Hello, Miss Brooks.
Oh, it's Harriet Conklin. Good morning, Harriet.
I wouldn't have interrupted your soliloquy, but you look sort of worried about something.
Worried? Me? Whatever gave you that idea?
Your complexion. It's not as ruddy as it usually is.
Oh, that's just from the new powder base I'm using. It's called Elephant Wallow Gray. Actually, though, I do have something on what's left of my mind, Harriet. It's Mrs. Finch. She's leaving the school.
Yes, I know. I heard she was going to have a B.A.B.Y.
Who told you?
Mr. Boynton.
That figures. But, Harriet, as you must know, you've always been one of my favorite pupils.
I'm glad you feel that way, Miss Brooks. You're my very favorite teacher.
Thanks. I'm very fond of your mother, too.
I know. And she's terribly fond of you, Miss Brooks.
I'm glad. Then there's your father.
Yes, I know.
Well, Harriet, do you think that I was going to... Well, that is...
Well, what are you trying to ask me, Miss Brooks?
Do you think he's warm enough for buttering this morning? At least, do you think I should have a little talk with him in his office?
About what?
Well, somebody's got to replace Mrs. Finch as head of the English department, and I figured...
But of course you'll get it.
Is that from the horse's mouth or just rumor? I mean, did you happen to overhear anything that... Look, Harriet, I don't want anybody to intercede for me because of any personal relationship we may have built up between us. What I'm trying to say is, well, I wouldn't want any principal's daughter, not even a clever, bright, pretty, industrious, talented, intelligent one like yourself, to become a fifth column for me.
Golly, Miss Brooks, nothing I could say would sway Daddy 1 inch. In fact, Mother and I bend over backwards rather than suggest anything about his duties at school. But I'm so sure you're our next head of the English department that I've even written a little poem about it. Care to hear it?
Well, if you don't think it'll put the whammy on me. Jinx anything.
Listen. To the head of the English department about to be, I present this little tribute to you from me. In class, you're good-tempered and don't fume or fret. But when it comes to our homework, you sure make us perspire. And in the forthcoming exams, whether I'm first or last, my feelings for you will be the same, especially if I pass. So, Miss Brooks, all hail to the head of the English department about to be. Well, what do you think of it, Miss Brooks?
It won't send Carl Sandburg screaming into the hills, Harriet. But, it's a lovely sentiment. Now, before I go into your father's lair, office, could you tell me what kind of a mood he's in?
Frankly, Miss Brooks, it isn't too good. When the newsboy that delivers our paper came around for the money this morning, Daddy bit his head off.
Fine. Then he should be too full to take a bite out of me.
Come in.
Good Good morning, Mr. Conklin.
Oh, it's you, Miss Brooks.
And how are you this bright, cheery, radiant day?
I'm cold, damp, and depressed. Now, what can I do for you that won't take longer than a few minutes?
Oh, it isn't what you can do for me, Mr. Conklin. It's what can I do for you. Oh, I know. I'll sharpen some pencils for you. Here's one.
Miss Brooks, I don't want you to sharpen anything.
But this one is so blunty. It'll just take a minute. There. Isn't that a lovely point?
But I don't...
Give me your thumb a minute.
Ow!
See what I mean? Now, I'll just do a few more of them, and you'll have enough for the week.
Confound it, Miss Brooks. I don't want any more of my pencil sharp.
Oh, it's really no trouble at all, Mr. Conklin. This is just one of those days when a person feels privileged to assist his fellow man. A day when a spirit of cooperation seems to beckon like a beacon.
Or a day when Mrs. Finch is leaving Madison and her position as head of the English department.
Mrs. Finch leaving Madison?
Yes. Yes, Miss Brooks. I think I told you that several days ago.
Oh, yes, of course. I've been so busy preparing my final examination papers, it must have slipped my mind. She's going to have a B.A.B.Y., isn't she?
Y.E.S. Yes. She is going to have a baby.
Well, I just know they'll be happy together. Now, let's see what else I can do to make this office a home away from home for you. I know. I'll just rinse out this pen wiper for you.
That happens to be a blue pocket handkerchief I got for Christmas. Must have fallen out of my coat.
Oh, then I'll tuck it back in for you. May I say you have a lovely eye for color combinations, Mr. Conklin? It goes so well with this pretty purple tie you've got on. But it seems a little loose around your neck. Let me tighten it a bit. There.
Miss Brooks.
There, that's better. Now you're both the same color.
Here, Miss Brooks. I don't know what you expect to get.
Oh, I must clean off that desk of yours, Mr. Conklin. And why in the world does that big open inkwell have to be perched right in the middle of everything?
Because I like it that way. Now listen to me, young woman.
I'll have things in shape in no time. First we'll move these papers next to the inkwell, and then... Oh.
Now, where is the inkwell perched, Miss Brooks?
Oh, don't worry about that, Mr. Conklin. Ink is good for the rug. Or is that ashes? Well, anyway, I'll go get a mop and...
Sit down, Miss Brooks.
Sit down?
Yes. As you know, I spent considerable time in the Army as a major.
Yes, I know, Mr. Conklin. And it always gave me a great feeling of security to know that somebody like you...
Quiet!
Yes, sir. Sorry.
At ease. Now then, Miss Brooks, from my Army experience, it's obvious to me that you are bucking for something.
Bucking, Mr. Conklin?
It's a colloquialism, Miss Brooks. It means that in order to gain some end of your own, you are acting like an eager beaver.
Want some pencil sharpened?
No!
To tell you the truth, Mr. Conklin, I just wanted to butter you up.
Now what? Come in.
Good morning, Mr. Conklin.
Well, it's Miss Enright.
Oh, and Miss Brooks is here, too. How nice. Darling, you look positively chic. I mean, just too terribly soigné.
Thanks, loads.
But what are you doing in school so early, darling? You're usually tearing into your room like a mad thing minutes after the bell is rung.
You must have telescopic vision to see me from the bus you're just catching at that time.
But what can I do for you, Miss Enright?
Oh, it isn't what you can do for me, Mr. Conklin. It's
what can I do for you?
Oh, I know. I'll sharpen some pencils for you, Mr. Conklin.
Thanks, just the same, Miss Enright.
Or maybe I could straighten out your desk. Oh, heavens, what happened to this inkwell?
I already straightened out his desk.
Well, don't worry about it, Mr. Conklin. I'm sure you can pick up another rug like that for $500 or $600. Oh, before I forget, I'd like you to have these woolen socks. I knitted them myself.
But, Miss Enright,
It was a labor of love, Mr. Conklin. I worked on these socks just every available moment I wasn't faithfully discharging my duties as an English teacher. They're merely a slight expression of my gratitude for having been granted the privilege of working for such a warm, kindly, and considerate boss as yourself.
This kid melted before she spreads it on.
Thank you for the thought, Miss Enright, but with Mrs. Finch leaving Madison,
Oh,
the number of...
is she really? Well, this is a big surprise.
It must be. You look even more surprised than you did when we heard about it last Tuesday.
That will do, Miss Brooks. Miss Enright, in view of the fact that you are eligible for the position that Mrs. Finch is relinquishing, I feel that I cannot accept this pair of socks.
But, Mr. Conklin, whatever shall I do with them?
You can give one to Mrs. Finch's baby. It'll make a nice sleeping bag for him.
I think you should know, ladies, that my selection will be based largely upon the results your students achieve in their final exams this morning. Therefore, you will not mark your own papers, but bring them into this office immediately after the tests are completed.
Are you going to mark them, Mr. Conklin?
Certainly not, Miss Brooks. My daughter Harriet is one of the students taking the tests. No, in order to assure complete impartiality, I've asked someone from another department to correct the papers. Mr. Boynton.
Mr. Boynton?
Oh, I know that you see each other socially on occasion, but he's the soul of honesty. And I know that he, like myself, would bend over backwards to see that justice is done.
Who's teaching everybody to bend over backwards, Arthur Murray?
Well, I don't think this arrangement is completely fair, Mr. Conklin. I never see Mr. Boynton.
Well, if it'll make you feel any better, Miss Enright, I'm not going to see him again either, until lunch.
If you'll just tell me what you want, Miss Brooks, I'll take your tray.
Oh, I'm too nervous to eat anything right now, Mr. Boynton. I'll wait until I find out the result of this morning's exam. The one you're marking, Mr. Boynton.
Oh. Well, that's something I'd rather not talk about, Miss Brooks. You see, I've promised Mr. Conklin...
I know you've got to be strictly impartial, Mr. Boynton, but couldn't you give me just an inkling of how I'm making out?
But I gave my word, Miss Brooks.
Just a teensy suggestion of the merest trace of a breath of a hint.
But I gave Mr. Conklin my scout's honor.
Oh. Well, then you might as well get yourself something to eat.
Oh, very well, Miss Brooks.
I hope you swallow a merit badge.
There you are, dear Mr. Boynton.
Oh, hello, Miss Enright.
May I share this table with you? The cafeteria is awfully crowded today.
Oh, I don't see why not, Miss Enright.
I do.
Oh, hello, darling. Oh, Mr. Boynton, before I forget, I'd like you to have these woolen socks. I knitted them especially for you.
I don't think I should, Miss Enright. You see, I'm still judging your examination papers, but, well, thanks just the same. Now, if you'll tell me what you'd like to eat.
Well, let me see. Oh, I see they have turkey today. Would you get me a drumstick, Mr. Boynton?
Why don't you get 2 drumsticks and put the socks on them?
Miss Brooks, Miss Enright, I've summoned you to my office to tell you that Mr. Boynton has finished grading the examination papers and has reported to me that both of your classes have done equally well. Therefore, it will have to be my decision after all.
And that decision is, dear Mr. Conklin?
I have decided...
Yes, dear Mr. Conklin.
I have decided that for the coming fiscal year, I shall save the Board of Education exactly $9.85 per month. There will be no head of the English department in this school.
Why, darling, what in the world are you doing?
Just breaking some of the pencils I sharpened this morning.
Miss Brooks returns in just a moment, but first, is your interest in events of the day based on business affairs, or are you someone who just enjoys the adventure of living? In either case, you have every reason to demand that news reports come to you quickly, accurately, and with no waste of words. That's another way of saying you have every reason to insist on hearing the news on CBS Radio. Throughout the day, every day, our far-flung staff of correspondents bring the most remote corners of the world to your hearth by means of their up-to-the-minute reports on developments at home and abroad. Whenever significant events take place, you can count on CBS News to bring you first-hand and well-detailed descriptions of what is happening, often broadcast right from the scene of the event. You can count on CBS newsmen, too, to make certain that fact is emphasized. Whether you need to know what is happening in the world in order to know what to buy or sell or manufacture, or if you just want to be in on every exciting chapter in the story of your lifetime, let CBS News keep you as fully informed as an expert. And now, once again, here is our Miss Brooks.
Well, I was a little depressed about not getting the job as head of the English department, but I perked up the following night when Mr. Boynton came by and took me to the movies. As we got to the theater, he stepped up to the box office.
2 tickets, please.
Here, Mr. Boynton, let me buy my own ticket.
Why, Miss Brooks, I wouldn't think of it.
Well, that's very nice.
You can pay me for yours when we get inside.
Thank you, and good night, Diamond Jim Boynton.
Weary of just window shopping? Wish you could afford so many of the things you see but your neighbors buy? Well, chances are they have money to spend because they manage their money well. And that includes a sensible savings plan. One that encourages saving for the future without straining your budget today. And here's that kind of plan. The Payroll Savings Plan. Buying United States savings bonds regularly where you work. With payroll savings, money is set aside for you before you get your paycheck. That way, you never count on it and never miss it. It's automatic saving. Before long, you have a stack of savings bonds, each one paying back $4 at maturity for every 3 put in. That means extra dollars for spending in the future. And when you know money set aside for the future, you can enjoy spending extra dollars today. So plan your spending, your saving wisely. Begin buying United States savings bonds on the easy automatic payroll savings plan now. Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden, is produced by Larry Burns, written and directed by Al Lewis, with music by Wilbur Hatch. Mr. Conklin was played by Gail Gordon. Others in tonight's cast were Jane Morgan, Dick Crenna, Gloria Macmillan, and Mary Jane Croft. Be with us again next week at the same time for another comedy episode of Our Miss Brooks. This is Roy Rowan speaking.
America listens most to the CBS Radio Network.
Our Miss Brooks, who teaches English at Madison High School, was as grateful as any other teacher for the Washington's birthday holiday observed last week.
And far be it from me to criticize the actions of the father of our country, but I can't help wishing that he had taken more than just one day to be born. Of course, the one day off was better than nothing, but I must admit I look forward to a weekend of not teaching with considerable anticipation. It isn't that I'm not fond of my pupils. I think they're a wonderful horde of kids. But after the events of last Thursday, I seriously considered giving up teaching and taking a course in rug tatting or peanut art. It started Thursday after school. Mr. Boynton, the usually bashful biologist, displayed a surprisingly different attitude when I entered his laboratory. Hello, Mr. Boynton.
Oh, hello, Miss Brooks. I was just going to come down to your room.
Oh, then I'll get back there right away. I wouldn't want to miss you.
Well, I guess what I have to say can be said here, all right. Although I can't help wishing the surroundings were different.
Different?
Yes, Miss Brooks, more romantic.
Romantic?
Mm-hmm. I know I haven't been the most aggressive chap in the world, but I do think of other things besides my biological experiments. Things that are, well, more personal.
Personal?
Yes. Things that a man thinks about a woman sometimes, whether she's a fellow teacher or not.
Or not? Just move my needle a notch to the right. Mr. Boynton, what is it you're trying to tell me I like to think?
Well, it's just that, like I said before, I wish the surroundings were different. I wish we were in a blue lagoon somewhere with a soft breeze blowing through your hair and... Oh, but we're not.
I can take care of that, Mr. Boynton.
Of course, I don't know why we have to be in a blue lagoon. I guess I just feel more confident when I'm over water.
Well, hop up on this stool and I'll fill a pan. Please continue, Mr. Boynton.
Well, as you know, Miss Brooks, I've been coaching the basketball team while Mr. Haney's been ill, and, well, we've been lucky enough to win the championship in our particular conference.
Yes, I know.
We've been invited to play in the state championships at Martinsville. The entire squad leaves this evening. We won't be back until next week. I just want you to know that, well...
Yes, Mr. Boynton?
It's terribly important that we win the championship.
Oh, you'll win it, Mr. Boynton. But what else were you going to say?
Well, I'm not so sure we'll win it. After all, we're playing a round robin.
Well, I bet you could spot him 4 worms and beat him easily.
I know you're kidding me, Miss Brooks, but I don't mind. You know, now that I'm leaving town, I've come to realize certain things about our relationship.
At last, formal recognition that we have a relationship.
Well, without getting too basic too quickly, I'd like to state that in the past, whenever the situation seems auspicious for declaring certain emotional reactions I've felt, upon finding myself in close proximity to you, that is, some outward manifestation seems to...
Pardon me, Mr. Boynton. Couldn't you get a little more basic more quickly?
Well, what I'm trying to say, Miss Brooks, is that there always seems to be some sort of interruption when I want to talk to you about certain things.
What kind of interruption? I see what you mean.
Come in.
Well, Boynton, as principal of Madison High, Oh, I thought you were alone.
We were for a minute. I was just saying goodbye to Mr. Boynton, Mr. Conklin.
I see, Miss Brooks. And have you finished saying goodbye?
No, Mr. Conklin, we haven't.
This boy's been taking brave shots.
What I mean to say, sir, is that we can finish talking after you've spoken to me.
Very well. I simply dropped in to wish you good luck with the team, Mr. Boynton. Remember, by winning the championship cup, you not only honor yourself and the athletes involved, but you bring further glory to the already hallowed name of Madison High. Glory and prestige, fame and honor.
How much have you bet on the game, Mr. Conklin?
Just a spin. I was... No! You know I never bet. It's just that we must get that cup.
So don't worry, Mr. Conklin. We've got the high-scoring forward of the conference on our team, you know.
I see. And how's this boy's condition? Tip-top, I trust?
Well, he's 6 foot 5 inches tall, so his top would be hard to tip. That's a joke, sir.
Thank you. By the way, Miss Brooks, is this the boy we transferred from Miss Enright's English class to yours?
Yes, sir.
Well, tell me, how's his state of mind?
What there is of it is quite happy.
Well, I know he's not a brilliant student, but now that he's in your class, Miss Brooks, I'm sure he'll improve. From what I hear, the boy's an all-round athlete. I want him eligible for other sports during the coming term.
Well, I'll do whatever I can, Mr. Conklin. Of course, it's difficult to give a test without any questions in it, but we'll get him through all right, Mr. Conklin.
Good, good. Well, I'll be running along now. Best of luck, Boynton. Bring back that cup.
Let's see now. Where were we? Oh, I know. You were telling me something personal.
Well, I wouldn't like to repeat myself, Miss Brooks. Do you remember what it was I said last?
Oh, how could I possibly remember what you said minutes ago? It was just something about you'd like to state that in the past, whenever the situation seemed auspicious for declaring certain emotional reactions you felt upon finding yourself in close proximity to me, that is, some outward manifestation seemed...
That's right. And then you said, couldn't we get a little more basic more quickly?
Right. Then you said there always seems to be some sort of interruption when you want to talk to me about certain things.
And then you said, what kind of interruption?
And then I wrote, whoever it is, get lost.
Come in.
Hiya, Coach. Oh, hello, Miss Brooks.
Hello, Walter. How are you?
Fine and dandy.
Good. Bye-bye, Walter.
I just wanted to remind Mr. Boynton about the big doings tonight. That there's going to be a torchlight parade and a snake dance. You'll be there, won't you, Miss Brooks?
Yes, Walter, if I can find a snake in time.
Yeah. Oh, before I go, Miss Brooks, have you seen Stretch around anywhere?
No, not for the past few hours.
Well, if he shows up, please send him into the gym, will you? I want to give him exact directions so he won't get lost on his way to the bus station.
Knowing Stretch, he can get lost after he's got the directions. We'll send him in to you if he shows up here. Thank you, and good day, Walter Denton.
Thank you, Miss Brooks. And may I suggest that you speed Mr. Boynton on his way with a salutation befitting the mentor of a sterling aggregation such as the Madison basketball team?
Walter.
So long, Coach.
I hope you're not embarrassed by Walter's inference, Miss Brooks.
If you think that would embarrass me, you need a coach. Now, let's take off for that Blue Lagoon, huh?
I'm afraid I don't comprehend, Miss Brooks.
My hair is blowing in the breeze again. What is it you were trying to tell me before Walter came in?
Well, it's just that with my leaving tonight, we won't be seeing each other at all over the weekend.
I know, Mr. Boynton.
Come in. Oh, it's Stretch. How are you, son?
Hi, Mr. Boynton. Hello, Miss Brooks.
Hi.
Well, how do you feel about our impending junket?
Huh?
Mr. Boynton wants to know how you feel about the trip you're taking this evening.
Oh, well, I ain't going.
Stretch, don't say ain't.
Don't say you ain't going. What's the trouble, Stretch? You're not ill, are you?
There's nothing wrong with me physically. My trouble is mostly mental.
Well, don't be self-conscious.
Oh, wait, what is it, Stretch? Maybe I can help you.
I'm afraid you can't, Mr. Boynton. You see, it's about a girl.
A girl?
You've seen them. They play on girls' softball teams. Is there anything I can do to help, Stretch?
Yes, Miss Brooks, but I'd rather talk to you alone, if it's all right with Mr. Boynton.
Why, certainly, Stretch. I've got to get down to the gym for a few minutes anyway. Miss Brooks, you will try to straighten him out, won't you? You know how important he is to the team.
I'll do what I can, Mr. Boynton.
Good. We'll see you at the snake dance tonight.
Now then, Stretch, tell teacher all about it.
Well, I know I ain't good in English, Miss Brooks.
You're not good in English.
I know. But ever since the first test you give me, I knew that I was going to improve and get the kind of marks in English that I've always striven for.
Striven for?
Oh, I know I got a lot to learn yet, but since I met you, I feel that you're more than just a teacher, that you understand kids, and that's why I come to you now. I ain't much at speeches, so I'll just say it right out, Miss Brooks. I'm in love.
In love? With what? Who?
My best friend's girl, Walter Denton.
People don't talk like this in any language. Stretch, are you trying to tell me that you've got a crush on Harriet Conklin?
Exactly. When she's in the stands rooting for the team, I play great. When she isn't, like she's not going to be where we're going to play over the weekend, I don't. So I ain't going, Miss Brooks.
Oh, now wait a minute, Stretch. Have you told Harriet how you feel about her?
Oh, no. Nor Walter either. I wouldn't want to hurt neither of their feelings. Just that I can't play without Harriet in the stands.
Look, Stretch, I heard that they're going to show the games on television right here in Madison. That means that Harriet will be in the stand. She'll be right on the sidelines watching your every move.
Honest, Miss Brooks?
May I swallow a board eraser? Now, will you attend the ceremonies tonight and then leave with the rest of the team for Martinsville?
Well, if you say Harriet will be there on the sidelines, I guess I'll go along.
Good. I knew you wouldn't disappoint Mr. Boynton and me.
He was kind of counting on me, I guess. Funny thing about him, though, for a smart scientist, he's not very smart about getting someplace sometime.
Why, Stretch, what do you mean?
Like with you, I mean. Here you are, a smart, pretty, brainy English teacher with no other attachments, and he don't do nothing about it.
Stretch.
Yes, Miss Brooks?
You ain't just flapping your lipstock.
Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden, will continue in just a moment. But first, if instead of feeling sorry for herself, Cinderella only had the good sense to listen to House Party every Monday through Friday over most of these stations, she could have had a fine time even when she was home sweeping the hearth. All that fun would have helped her household chores get done faster. And it wouldn't have hurt her one bit if she went off to that fancy dress ball with a smile either. The wonderful thing about House Party is that you can enjoy it 5 days a week. It's good to hear whether you're working, resting, or out driving the car. And if you're attending a fancy dress ball at night or just spending a quiet evening at home, you'll find the high spirits that House Party gives rise to will carry right over to the evening ahead.
Well, the pre-victory celebration was a huge success. A 1-hour snake dance and the 6-mile torch parade came off promptly at 8 o'clock. And my seat came off promptly at 9. After seeing the basketball squad off for the bus depot, I immediately limped home for a nice, warm bath. Mrs. Davis, my landlady, was sitting in the living room when I opened the door.
Good evening, Connie. How was the snake dance?
Very snaky, thanks.
Did you bid Mr. Boynton a fond goodbye, Connie?
Yes, Mrs. Davis.
What did he say?
Goodbye.
Oh, that man. When is he going to open his eyes and see that?
I think they're opening a little bit, Mrs. Davis. This afternoon in the laboratory, he really started to make a noise like an interested party.
Oh, what happened?
Nothing. I got all involved with the trials and tribulations of a star basketball player and his unrequited romance. But the weekend is upon us, and I won't have to play Dorothy Dix for a few days anyway.
What are you going to do tonight, Connie?
I have some very elaborate plans, Mrs. Davis. Tonight I'm going to have myself a schoolteacher's B&B.
Benedictine and brandy?
No, bath and bed. If you'll excuse me now, I'll drag my carcass into the bathroom and run a tub.
Oh, you don't have to do that, Connie. I've already let the water in. I was going to bathe Minerva tonight.
The cat? But cats aren't supposed to get baths, are they?
Oh, Minerva loves it. Besides, I just got to bathe her.
Why? Are the mice complaining?
No, she was walking near the sink this morning and slipped on the tile, poor dear. Fell right into some dough I was mixing for bread.
Oh. Then maybe Minerva better use the water that's in the tub.
She can wait. You run along, Connie, and take a nice restful...
Now, who in the world can that be? Coming! Stretch, what are you doing here? Why aren't you at the bus depot?
I ain't going.
Again? Well, come in for a minute.
Thanks, Miss Brooks.
This is Mrs. Davis. You remember Stretch?
Of course. He's the famous quarterback on our hockey team, isn't he?
No, lately he's been playing goalie for our tennis team.
Could I talk to you alone, Miss Brooks?
Naturally. Mrs. Davis, would you mind making a little tea?
Not at all, Connie. I'd like some myself. How about you, Stretch? Nice glass of milk?
No, thanks, Mrs. Davis.
Well, I'll bring some anyway. Nothing like milk for a growing boy.
I guess you're pretty disappointed in me, Miss Brooks. But Say, what's that?
What's what?
Right behind Mrs. Davis. There's a cake walking into the kitchen.
Oh, relax, Stretch. I see it, too. That's just our cat, Minerva. She fell into some dough. Now tell me why you're not with the team.
It's Harriet, Miss Brooks. Even though she'll be seeing me play on television, I won't be able to see her.
I was afraid you'd figure that out. Look, Stretch. I'll get you a nice picture of Harriet and send it airmail. You'll have it by game time tomorrow night. How's that?
Gee, I don't know, Miss Brooks. I would like to have a picture of Harriet, but I wouldn't want anybody to know that Walter's my best friend.
I know, Stretch. You wouldn't want to hurt Walter or Harriet or either of their feelings. Believe me, I'll get the picture without anyone knowing for whom it's intended.
I hate to be such a problem to you, but, well, I never mixed much with other kids outside of athletics, I mean. And I think my name has something to do with it.
Your name?
You see, my real name is Fabian Snodgrass. Just when I was little and kids kidded me about it, I got sensitive.
I see. Stretch, do you have any brothers or sisters?
Sure. 2 sisters and 1 brother.
And do they have peculiar names, too?
Oh, no. They all got perfectly normal names. It's like the other day when I was talking to my sister. Rapunzel, I said.
Rapunzel. Well, that does it. I'll go into your case more thoroughly when you get back from this trip, Stretch, but right now you've got to rejoin the team. Come along.
You won't forget to send a picture, Miss Brooks.
I won't forget, Stretch. Lots of luck and goodbye again. Rapunzel Snodgrass. Now, there's a family for you. Oh, well, now for that bath. I better see if the water's still warm. Oh, it's pretty cold. I better let it out and run a fresh one.
Come and get your tea, Connie.
I'll be right there, Mrs. Davis. I'm afraid Minerva's water got a little cool. I'm running another tub for myself.
Very well, dear. Where did Stretch go?
Back to the bus depot. Wait till I close this door.
poor kid, he's hopelessly in love.
Yes, I overheard. But he shouldn't worry so much about the other boy in the case. Why, when my sister Angela was a girl, she never went out with one boy at a time.
She didn't?
No, she played the field, Angela did. Why, I remember one time she went out with twins for over a year before she found out they were triplets.
Poor Angela. The eternal quadrangle. I'd better take a look at that bath. There. Nice and hot. Now to get these clothes off and... Oh, no, not another interruption.
Hi, Miss Brooks. It's me. Can I come in for a minute?
Yes, Walter, but that's about all. I'm trying to take a bath.
Well, that'll have to wait, Miss Brooks.
Well, it's getting plenty of practice. What's the matter, Walter?
It's Stretch. He disappeared from the station, and when last seen, he was heading in this direction.
He did come here, Walter, but I sent him back down to the depot.
Well, that seems like a pretty silly maneuver. So what did he come here about?
He wanted some advice. He's in love, Walter.
In love? In love with who?
Whom?
Who's she?
He's in love with somebody that doesn't love him, a girl who goes with another fellow.
Now, what kind of a girl would go with a fellow when she could go with a star basketball player like Stretch?
I can't divulge the details, Walter, but Stretch was miserable about the situation.
But he's not supposed to be miserable. This is a crucial time. If he likes a girl, she should go with him and brush off this other jerk.
Careful, Walter. You may hate yourself for this. Look, I've smoothed his feathers and sent him back to play the game of his life. Now, you get back to the depot and don't say a word about what I've told you.
Well, all right, Miss Brooks. But I wish I could get a peek at the guy that's got Stretch's girl buffaloed.
You may never see him till you start shaving. Goodbye to you again, Walter Denton. Oh, let's see how this water feels now. It could be warmer. I'll let a little out and refill it. Singing in the bathtub, la-da-da-da-da, singing in the bathtub. Now we'll just put the plug back in, run some more water. I always thought that teaching was my only profession, but bathing can be quite a career, too. Yeah, that ought to be just right. Singing in the bathtub, nothing can go wrong. Singing in the bathtub, oh, I should live so long. Come in, whoever you are. Oh, it's Mr. Boynton.
Well, I'm sorry to bother you, Miss Brooks, but Walter Denton's disappeared from the bus depot. Have you seen him?
Of course I've seen him. Won't you come inside, Mr. Boynton?
I haven't time, Miss Brooks. You say you saw Walter. Where is he now?
On the way back to the bus depot.
Oh, good. Stretch got down there before I left, and when he found Walter gone, he was quite upset. Now everything will be all right. Sorry to have troubled you, Miss Brooks. See you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye, you greyhound Lochinvar. Well, at least there's nothing to stop me from taking that bath now. I couldn't have gotten cool in that short space of time. Let's see. No, it's exactly the right temperature. I don't have to let out a drop. Wrong again. Oh, no, it's not you again, Stretch.
I'm a monster.
What do you want from me, an affidavit? What's wrong this time?
When Walter came back to the depot, I took one look at him, and then I knew.
Knew what?
I couldn't go to Martinsville without his girl, Harriet. I just can't play unless she's really in the stands.
All right, Stretch, I'll do my best. Go back down to the depot and wait for me.
What are you going to do, Miss Brooks?
I'm going to slip on a straitjacket and run over to the Conklins. I wouldn't have disturbed you this late, Mr. Conklin, but it's absolutely essential if you want Madison to win that championship.
What's essential, Miss Brooks?
That you let Harriet here go to Martinsville with the team.
Me? Go with the team tonight? But of course it's Walter. He needs me.
Stop squealing, girl.
But don't you see, Daddy? Walter's the manager of the team, and he needs me by his side. I hardly dared to hope for it, but now I know. Walter's my life, my future, my all.
Walter isn't the one who requested that you come along, Harriet. It was Stretch.
Stretch? But he's the best athlete at Madison. I'll rush to his side at once.
What about Walter?
Who needs Walter? When does the bus leave, Miss Brooks?
Not so fast, young lady. What's this all about, Miss Brooks?
Well, it's Stretch, Mr. Conklin. He's got a crush on Harriet. And if she'll just be in the stands and root for him, he says Madison is bound to win. There's really no harm in it.
No harm in it, but Martinsville is 400 miles away. The basketball team is composed entirely of boys. Boys and Mr. Boynton. Who'd chaperone my daughter?
Who else but Miss Brooks? Come on, Miss Brooks, pack a bag and we'll have to...
Oh, just a minute, Harriet. I can't go.
Oh, of course you can. It's your idea, isn't it? Now go on home and get... Wait a minute. With Mr. Boynton coaching the team, you'll need a chaperone yourself.
Then why don't you come along, Daddy?
What? Me? The principal of the school leave Madison for a weekend? To watch our basketball team play a round robin with the best teams in the state? Tell your mother we're leaving at once.
Oh, just one thing, Mr. Conklin.
Yes?
Do you think they have a bathtub in Martinsville? Well, I never thought when I woke up this morning that I'd be riding on the bus with you and the team tonight, Mr. Boynton.
Oh, I'm glad it worked out this way, Miss Brooks.
I am too.
Me too.
Driver, I'm Mr. Conklin, the principal of Madison High.
Oh, how do you do, Mr. Conklin? My name's Fredericks. What can I do for you?
Well, I'd like to open a few of these windows if nobody minds. It's kind of stuffy in here.
Yeah, it is kind of crowded in the bus. You see, we didn't expect all you extra passengers. In fact, there was one kid back at the depot I couldn't even allow on.
Which kid was that, Mr. Fredericks?
Oh, some tall fella said his name was Snodgrass, Stretch Snodgrass.
Well, just as long as he wasn't an important member of the team, it's...
Stretch Snodgrass!
Eve Arden as our Miss Brooks returns in just a moment, but first, give the world a break. Give it the smile it deserves, and while you're at it, give yourself a break, too. Keep smiling to the antics of our expanded Amos and Andy Music Hall and on the hour-long Robert Q. Lewis Show. Both of these lighthearted programs come your way over most of these stations each Monday through Friday night and Saturday in the daytime, too. And each of them, in any number of ways, is a listening delight. Amos and Andy, the Kingfish, and all of their friends, including some of the biggest names in show business, are open for business 6 times a week, now at their music hall. And since their business is a pleasure, you'll find it a happy place to be. The Robert Q. Lewis Show offers you unlimited opportunities for having a good time, too. Ray Block and his orchestra to back them up, Judy Johnson and Richard Hayes handle any old or new song hit with ease and distinction. Of course, in his own informal fashion, Robert Q. Lewis keeps the laughs coming with unflagging speed. So tomorrow, or any Monday through Friday night, and on Saturday in the daytime from now on, do your full share of the smiling. Hear the Amos and Andy Music Hall and the Robert Q. Lewis Show. And when you do, get set to find the whole world smiling back at you. And now, once again, here is our Miss Brooks.
Well, Mr. Conklin was furious, and the only way I could square myself with him was to give up my seat to Stretch when the bus returned to pick him up. Then I went home, got undressed, and steered my stubborn little course for the bathroom. Now I can really... Oh, hello, Mrs. Davis.
Hello, Connie. I was going to postpone Minerva's bath till tomorrow, but she just couldn't wait any longer.
Oh? When did you put her into the tub, Mrs. Davis?
Just this minute, Connie.
Well, I can't wait any longer either. Move over, Minerva.
Where are you going, little girl? Said the wolf to Red Riding Hood. I'll bet you're going to your grandmother's house and that's a basket of goodies you have on your arm. You lose your bet, said Red Riding Hood. In the first place, it's not a basket of goodies, it's my lunch. In the second place, I'm not going to my grandmother's house, I'm staying here. In the third place, I'm not a little girl in the first place, but a full-fledged member of the Ground Observer Corps spotting planes here on this hilltop. Incidentally, spotters are needed for all shifts to help keep Uncle Sam's defense network operating 24 hours a day. If you have nothing better to do than jump out at people from behind trees, I suggest you might use your time more valuably by volunteering for the Ground Observer Corps yourself.
Civil defense is everybody's business. Little girls, growled the wolf, are getting too smart these days, and he was right. It's smart to help guard your own home and community from danger from the air. Why don't you join your neighbors who are already members of GOC? Wherever you live, whatever hours you can give, there's a place for you in Operation Skywatch. CBS Radio urges you to get in touch with your local Civil Defense Office for more information about the Ground Observer Corps. Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden, is produced by Larry Burns, written and directed by Al Lewis with music by Wilbur Hatch. Mr. Conklin was played by Gail Gordon. Others in tonight's cast were Jane Morgan, Dick Crenna, Gloria McMillan, Leonard Smith, and Frank Nelson. Be with us again next week at the same time for another comedy episode of Our Miss Brooks.
Well, why don't you tell Harriet how you feel about her? I'm sure Mr. Conklin would welcome the change.
Well, I don't want to go with Mr. Conklin. Hey, you see, Miss Brooks, for quite a while now I've been smuggling little notes to her every day without signing them.
Oh, so you're the one.
What one?
The one who's been slipping Omar Khayyam into Harriet's eclairs.
Yeah, that's right. I lost a book somewhere, so I had to make up today's poem myself. That's why I came to you, Miss Brooks. I want you to hear it and tell me if it's okay.
All right, Stretch, go ahead.
To Harriet. Oh, I love the dear silver that ain't in your hair. And the brow that ain't furrowed or wrinkled with care. I kiss the dear fingers, not toil-worn for me. Oh, I love you, dear Harriet.
Well, what's the next line?
Oh, I couldn't think of another original one, so I just put down Mother McCree. Well, Miss Brooks, what's your honest opinion?
My honest opinion, Stretch, is that it's pretty abominable.
No kidding? Hey, that's the very first poem I ever wrote.
That's amazing. I know poets who've written for years without getting that abominable. Look, Stretch, if you want to make a hit with Harriet and get her mind off Walter, which will get Mr. Conklin's mind off me, you'll have to give her a different type of poem.
What do you mean, Miss Brooks?
Well, something like, say, I've got one right here. There, it's all written out for you.
Let's see. Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue, and evermore with love I tremble. Miss Brooks, what's a bell's tongue?
It's right in front of the bell's tonsils. Read the rest of it.
And the bell swings, and then your name rings out, and everything you do lives in my heart.
Well, what do you think of it, Stretch?
Hey, it's keen. What I like about it, it's just the right size to fit into a jelly donut. I'll go right to the cafeteria now.
Oh, wait a minute, Stretch. I'd like you to do something for me first, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, Miss Brooks. What is it?
Well, take this requisition to Mr. Conklin's office, will you?
Oh, sure, right away.
And no detours now. I want those flower pots as soon as possible.
Okay. And thanks for the poem, Miss Brooks.
Oh, but it was Stretch Snowgrass.
Oh, Harriet. Gosh, Harriet, you're just the one I wanted to see. Hey, Harriet, even though you're Walter's girl, well, I can't help it. I just got to tell you how I feel about you. Harriet, I think you're abominable.
What?
I felt it right.
I'll walk you down to the... Oh, hiya, Stretch.
Hold on, Walter. I can't talk to you now. I got to hurry and deliver a message to Mr. Conklin. So long, Harriet. Bye, everybody.
Well, what's the matter with him?
I don't know. He seems awfully mixed up. He told me I was abominable, and then he gave me this note.
A note? What does it say?
I don't quite understand it. It says, I would like a dozen small flower pots for my windowsill.
Ask Miss Brooks to step into my office immediately, please. Now then, Stretch, you're positive Miss Brooks told you to give this note to me?
Yes, Mr. Conklin.
I see. That will be all, Stretch. Thanks.
Very well, Miss Brooks. And Miss Brooks?
Yes?
Isn't love a wonderful feeling?
It's Dan.
That is.
Andy.
Poor Miss Brooks. In love with the one who loves me. That's life, I guess. The eternal triangle.
Oh, good morning, Harriet. Have you seen Miss Brooks?
Mr. Boynton! Dear Mr. Boynton. Dear Mr. Boynton. Au revoir, Mr. Boynton.
But, Harriet, just a minute. What's this envelope? For Miss Brooks. Oh, I guess she wants me to give it to her. Funny how kids act sometimes.
Come in.
You busy, Miss Brooks?
Oh, no, Mr. Boynton. I was just sorting these cards.
I just dropped in to tell you how much I'm enjoying the book I borrowed. Of course, what was coaching the basketball team and all, I haven't finished it. But there are several passages in it that really remind me of my youth. I was a romantic kid, all right.
Them were the days.
You might not believe this, but I even wrote poetry. Isn't that silly?
I don't think it's silly at all. But I'm still a little amazed at your interest in such amorous literature.
Maybe you've underestimated me, Miss Brooks.
Underestimated you?
Yes. I almost forgot. This envelope. It's for you. Well, so long, Miss Brooks.
But Mr. Boynton. What is all this about? What's in here? Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue, and evermore with love I tremble. And the bell swings, and then your name rings out, and everything you do lives in my heart. Why, Mr. Boynton, you underestimated dog, you. Well, lunch period finally arrived, and I hurried into the cafeteria just as Mr. Boynton got there. This, of course, was pure coincidence. The same pure coincidence which has occurred in his threat to boycott this cafeteria last week seems to have done some good, doesn't it, Mr. Boynton?
Yes, indeed. They've even put flower pots around on the windowsills. I've just ordered some for my biology lab. They certainly do a lot to relieve the drabness of a schoolroom.
So do you. I mean, aren't flower pots a pretty expensive luxury for a teacher?
Oh, they don't cost anything at all, Miss Brooks. Mr. Conklin gets them through the school nursery. You just tell him how many you want, he signs the requisition, and that's all there is to it. You ought to get a dozen or so for your room. I suggest you request the small-sized pots, Miss Brooks. You'll be surprised how a few flowers will brighten things up. Frankly, when I was in your room this morning, it seemed rather cold.
Cold? For a biologist, you're a pretty bad judge of temperature. But if it's flower pots you want, it's flower pots you'll get. And so I would like a dozen small flower pots for my windowsills. Come in.
Oh, it's me, Stretch Snodgrass. You gotta help me, Miss Brooks. I got a problem.
What's your problem, Stretch?
Well, as you know, Walter Denton is my best friend. And I know he's gone on Harriet Conklin. And even though she's my best friend's girl, I can't help it. I'm gone on her. Even Mr. Boynton has noticed how it's affecting me.
Sybil's daughter's a fine girl, and I'm quite fond of poetry myself.
You, Mr. Boynton?
Yes, me. There are things in my life besides Toad, too.
Really? What?
One of my favorite bits of verse is quite similar to the one you've written. It goes, your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue, and evermore with love I tremble. And the bell swings, and then your name rings out, and everything you do lives in my heart. Well, Walter, what do you think of it?
It's pretty mushy, if you ask me.
Not at all, Walter. That's one of the loveliest passages in Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac. You'd be surprised how efficacious those lines can be.
I sure would.
Here, I'll write it down for you. I'm sure this will be a great help in your pursuit of the fair Harriet.
Oh, you certainly have beautiful handwriting, Mr. Boynton. Oh, gosh, Harriet practically swoons every time you write the questions on the blackboard.
Well, that's very flattering, Walter. There you are.
Oh, I sure appreciate this, Mr. Boynton. And, gosh, after all the trouble you've gone through already, I hate to ask you, but, well, if this works, will you be my best man?
I have sent for you, Miss Brooks, for two reasons.
Yes, Mr. Conklin?
First, I want you to pick up your...
Not yet. Oh, well, here it is. I found it, Mr. Conklin.
Well, good for you. Now, the second thing I want you to do is to change my daughter Harriet's seat in your class.
Oh, why, sir? What's wrong with her present location?
She's right across the aisle from a case of walking arrested development called Walter Denton. Their very proximity has fostered an infantile romance, culminating in Harriet's receiving a series of mushy, ridiculous poems.
But, Mr. Conklin, Walter didn't send those poems.
Just move him away from my daughter or vice versa.
But, Mr. Conklin, the poems...
The only poem I'm interested in, Miss Brooks, goes... Yours not to reason why, yours but to do or die.
I believe in private enterprise myself.
Good day, Miss Brooks.
But, Mr. Conklin...
I have spoken.
Yes, Master, I go. When I left Mr. Conklin's office, I headed for my classroom again.
Hello, Miss Brooks.
Oh, hello, Harriet.
Guess what? I just found another poem smuggled into my history book. And this one is the loveliest one of all. And the most important, too, because I know who said it. I know at last who my secret admirer has been.
Look, Harriet. How do you know?
By his handwriting. Every time I see it on the blackboard, I've practically swooned. I've got to let him know I know who he is.
Well, how are you going to do that?
In a very subtle manner, Miss Brooks. I'll just give him back his poem without saying a word. Then he'll know that I know.
Yeah, but Harriet, your father doesn't admire your secret admirer.
Oh, he will. I wish I had an envelope to put this note in, though. I don't want to lose it before I meet...
You can use this envelope, Harriet. Wait till I take out these report cards. There you are. Now, I'd better be getting into my room, Harriet. I've got to sort these cards before my next class.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Conklin. Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue. And evermore with love I tremble. Now, really. Come in.
You sent for me, Mr. Conklin?
Yes, Miss Brooks, I did. Sit down, won't you?
Thank you.
Miss Brooks, I don't know quite how to begin. I received your note, of course, and, well, I never suspected you felt the way you do.
Well, I did decide rather recently, Mr. Conklin.
But, Miss Brooks, you know Mrs. Conklin so well. What do you suppose she'd say?
Well, don't you think she'd like the idea?
Like the idea?
Mr. Conklin, aren't you exaggerating the importance of my little note? It isn't as if I'm asking for the moon. All I want is some little ones.
Little ones?
Oh, yes. I've got as much right to them as anybody else, haven't I?
But Miss Brooks...
If a dozen is too many, I'll settle for 6. And if you don't mind, I'd like to have them by the end of the day.
You've been working very hard. And I know conditions here are too good.
Well, conditions aren't too good in any school, Mr. Conklin. That's one of the reasons I want them.
Just let me review this request, Miss Brooks. You say you want 6 little ones by the end of the day?
That's right. I'd like to string them along my windowsill.
String them along your windowsill?
Well, that's better than letting them lie around the nursery, isn't it?
What are you talking about?
Flower pots. I want you to sign the requisition for me.
Requisition? But I didn't get any requisition. Here's what Snodgrass brought me.
Your name hangs in my heart like a bell's tongue.
Excuse me, Daddy, but there's been a terrible mistake.
What are you talking about, Harriet? And why aren't you in class, Denton?
Oh, it was such a mistake, Mr. Conklin.
Oh, I guess I got excited. Pardon me, but the door was open, Mr. Conklin, and
Mr. Boynton, what is this, a convention?
I heard you were called up on the carpet, Miss Brooks, so I thought I'd come by and see if there's anything I can do.
Oh, that's very sweet of you, Mr. Boynton. It's about the poem.
What is going on here? What's all this poem nonsense anyway?
Don't you see, Daddy? Dept gave you the poem he was planning to give me by mistake.
Yeah, but he wasn't the only one that gave Harriet a poem. I did, too. I put one in her history book.
What? I've had about enough of this. Clear out of my office, all of you. Straight here, take this. This poem with Harriet gave it to me. Here.
Walter gave it to me. Here.
Mr. Boynton gave it to me. Here.
Thank you, Walter.
Oh, that was fun. Let's go around again. And the first one that misses gets it.
Our Miss Brooks manages to keep busy teaching English at Madison High School. But in spite of her preoccupation with her own subject, she's managed to find quite a bit of time lately to pursue the study of biology.
Well, one thing is certain. I've spent more time pursuing the study of biology than the biology teacher has spent pursuing me. Anyway, I was pretty surprised last week when my landlady, Mrs. Davis, told me that Mr. Boynton had borrowed my copy of Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac from our library. We were discussing it last Thursday morning while Mrs. Davis was getting breakfast ready.
I can't understand it, Tommy. Cyrano is a very romantic play. Does Mr. Boynton read that kind of literature?
I doubt it very much. Although he surprised me once before this when I saw a book on his desk called Come Fly With Me.
That sounds like a very racy...
That read, The Life and Times of an African Tsetse Fly.
Well, maybe now that the weather's getting nicer, he'll warm up a bit. Remember the old saying, in the spring, a young man's fancy.
Not Mr. Boynton. He's no fancier in the spring than he is in the winter. Oh, that must be Walter Denton to drive me to school. Come on in, Walter. The door's open.
I'll be in the kitchen. Just call me if you want some breakfast.
Breakfast? If I call, just stand guard over lunch and dinner. Oh, good morning, Walter. You're just in time for some breakfast.
Yeah, no, thanks, Miss Brooks. I'm really worried. It's about Harriet Conklin. She's been very cool to me lately. It's this poetry she's been getting.
Poetry? From whom?
Well, that's just the trouble. I don't know who from.
You don't know from whom?
I don't know from nothing. Somebody's been sending her love lyrics like mad. I suspect that the sender of the notes works around the cafeteria.
Why the cafeteria?
Because yesterday, while Harriet wasn't looking, I switched desserts with her, and sure enough, tucked right in the middle of my chocolate eclair, Omar Khayyam. At least I think it was Omar Khayyam.
You mean you're not sure?
Well, it was pretty gooey.
That's Omar Khayyam, all right.
And these are the main points of difference in the circulatory systems of cold and warm-blooded creatures. Well, that'll be all for today.
You'll excuse me, Mr. Boynton, but you asked me to wait after class?
Oh, yes, Walter. About that note you were scribbling while you should have been listening to my lecture on the North American tree toad. Hand it over.
Oh, but Mr. Boynton, it's personal.
I'm sorry, Walter. I've got to find out what it is that's so much more important to you than the North American tree toad.
Oh, you're all right, Mr. Boynton, but you won't learn much from this.
Now, let's see. Oh, it's a poem. "'Tis but for you that my heart does beat, and over it does repeat. As it says your name, it twists like a lariat, just because your name is Harriet."
Well, Mr. Boynton, now you know it's Harriet Conklin that's more important to me than a North American tree toad.
I didn't mean to embarrass you, Walter. I think our esteemed principal